Be careful. Alright. So thank you all for coming, although it's raining. First few people who made it, I think, did not catch me. I'm sorry. Just did? Alright. So today's expert talk will be by Dr. Arvind Bhateja and Naveen. Naveen is missing at this point. Alright. Cool. So what are we going to talk about today would be two main topics, which is training and nutrition. Training can be of different forms. You need not be, racing. You can even be an endurance athlete. And same thing goes with the nutrition as well. You can plan your nutrition based on endurance event, or a trip, or a time travel. So there are various forms of planning this. So before we start the session, I'd like to mention very important things. Where the washroom is, in case you all want to do it. The washroom is behind this wall, and we have some water over there, very prominent. The yellow T-shirt over there, that's water dispenser. What's scarecrow? Does he have a name? Not yet. Okay. And would request you all to keep your phones in silent, so that the event is not disturbed. So let me take you to the proceedings of the evening. First, it would be Doctor was going to be talking about the nutrition bit, right? Yeah. Okay. The nutrition
muscle physiology, nutrition, hydration, and recovery.
Great. And followed with
pretty much everything.
So Naveen will follow after that, and Naveen will be talking about.
So Doc's kind of lay the framework for kind of stuff, physiology, kind of the science of the concepts, the ideas, and then I'll kind of maybe try on top of that lay over some a little bit of practical application. There's a lot of different kinds of athletes in this group, so it'll be tough to address everyone kind of with an umbrella, but we'll try and kind of address everyone as specifically as possible. That's what I'll do.
All right. So we'll leave the Q&A for once the session is over itself. You can ask as many questions as you want. It's not limited to one or two. After the fifth question, we shoot you. Okay. Great. And then we wrap this session with a group photo, which is our t-shirt for all expertise, and we go. And I'm thinking Nagaraj is here. Okay. So we're going to have a physio come by. He's coming. Okay. So once he's here, I'm going to announce something else, which is something related to getting a session at the physio itself. So over to Doctor now, and he will take over there.
I will change Hi, good evening, everyone. I don't know whether all of you, I don't think I've written with all of you, but I have been writing now for about close to 7 years. And I'm by no means an expert in anything to do with cycling. Certainly not anything to do with nutrition. Although I come from a medical background, my specialty is brain and spine surgery, which is as far removed from nutrition as you can get. And I also have to confess the last time I looked at a biochemical pathway or a biochemistry textbook was in 1988.
I was born right about that.
So this talk certainly made me go back and open some of the biochemistry textbooks that I used to open when I was in medical school. And it's been as much learning for me as I hope it will be for all of you. I picked up bits of information, read about nutrition a little bit during my journey as a cyclist. I just came back from the tour of friendship in Thailand, which is a 5-day stage race, which Naveen has done and experienced, and along with my brother Vivek. That certainly taught me some new things about hydration and nutrition, which I hadn't figured out, and maybe I can share some of those things with you. So I'm going to go through very quickly with some slides. Yeah, so the first thing I want to say is I'm not an experienced nutritionist. I have no formal training in nutrition physiology or exercise physiology or cycling physiology. And all that I'm telling you is really coming from a background and having been in cycling for about 7 years. The other important thing that I need to mention is I belong to the team Spectrum Racing, and we have hydration sponsorship from FAST&UP, who also are here this evening. That's one of my disclosures to the evening. So let's start off with some pretty high-tech physiology, and I'm glad I'm starting first because if it was late in the evening, I think you guys would fall asleep.
So quick question, how many people in here like their organic chemistry? It's good. Rohan, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, what 6 organic? Okay, I hate it.
Okay, so this is the molecule of cellular energy, right? This is the ubiquitous molecule which is present throughout the body, most importantly in our muscles. This is known as adenosine triphosphate, or ATP for short. This is what our muscles need to work. Very simply, this is like the fuel that you put in your car, it's the fuel that you put in your muscles, right? So when you say what fuels your ride, actually it's ATP which eventually fuels your ride. So as you see, ATP has 3 phosphate, so triphosphate means it has 3 phosphate molecules which are linked to it, and this is a very key part of the structure of ATP. Nothing else really changes. So when ATP is used, it loses one of its phosphates, so it becomes a diphosphate from what it was, a triphosphate. And the whole process of energy metabolism in the body is about how to put that phosphate back onto ATP and onto ADP and make it ATP again, so it can be used. The important thing to understand is that our muscles do store a little bit of ATP. It's not a whole lot. So they do store a little bit of ATP, but it's just enough to last us for a few seconds. It's not enough to fuel a long ride. So therefore, the body has to fall back on other pathways to produce ATP as and when we need it. So the body believes in being very conservative with its stores of ATP. So it doesn't unnecessarily produce and store ATP when it's not needed. Only when it's needed, it's manufactured or regenerated from ATP. Very quickly, there are 3 energy systems as far as our muscles go. One is called the ATP-PC energy system, which is the fast-acting, rapid, immediate system. And if you're going on a sprint, for example, that's the one that gives you that immediate burst of energy. So the maximum it can give you is about 12 seconds of energy at about 36 calories a day. But the problem with this is that it burns out very fast, because I told you the ATP stores in the muscle are very limited. So the PC stands for phosphocreatine. So that's another enzymatic pathway in the muscles which regenerates phosphate and regenerates ATP very quickly, so that you get a little more ATP than you have stored. So the advantage of this is that it works very fast, but unfortunately it's very limited. So it can't last you for a long time. The second is the glycolytic system. The glycolytic system is nothing but breakdown of glucose to produce energy. That's what glycolysis is. Okay? Glycolysis. Glyco is glucose, lysis is breaking. So that produces moderate power for a moderate amount of duration. And you have 2 types of glycolysis, the fast and the slow. The fast is the one that produces lactic acid. So as a byproduct of glycolysis, you get a molecule called pyruvate. Pyruvate can either go through an oxidative pathway or a non-oxidative pathway, which we know as aerobic or anaerobic. Okay? So if it goes through an aerobic pathway, it finally ends up producing oxygen. If it goes through an anaerobic pathway, it finally ends up producing lactic acid and hydrogen ions. And that's what causes that burn in your muscles at the end of a hard effort, a hard short effort. And the third is the oxidative system, in which ATP can be produced by regeneration of pyruvate through the Krebs cycle, by passage of hydrogen ions through the electron transport chain, and by fat oxidation, that's known as beta oxidation. So this is where the oxidative system can give you a long, sustained bout of energy for many days even, by using fat. Okay, so if you're doing a low effort, somewhere at about less than 50% or of VO2 max, then your fat is being metabolized to produce energy. This unfortunately does not work for a short hard effort. So, like I mentioned at the bottom of the screen, less than 12-second efforts, ATP and phosphocreatine system. Between 12 to 30 seconds is fast glycolysis. 30 to 50 seconds it starts shifting from fast to slow glycolysis. And then you have the oxidative pathway, which gives you energy for beyond that.
So, quick thing, Doc. Think about that. So, this is kind of, I figured I'd kind of lay a little bit of translation on this as we go along. I figured it would be easier.
Sure.
So, basically, yeah, I mean, most of you probably got that, but just to kind of relate it to what you kind of experience on a ride or run outside. You know, say you were doing, how many of you have done Nandi on your bicycles? Or half the row. Okay, cool. Yeah. So I mean, so this ATP PC system is probably what you use when you go up that really steep kicker, right? That 20-second burst. As you train, you're able to do that more repeatedly. You know, for some of us, we're able to do it about 5, 6, 7, 8 times, and then we're like done. You know. As a trained athlete, you're able to do that just multiple number of times, 6,000 in a row, you know, probably 100 of those. 12 to 30-second effort, fast glycolysis. This is stuff that comes from your fast glycolysis. Think of this effort as probably that long stretch on Nandi track, you know, that 1 minute kind of straight uphill ramp, right? That's when you kind of use your muscle glycogen. And fat glycolysis, of course, fat oxidation, typically your entire ride to the base. Yeah, but downhill is coasting. It's like it's regenerating your energy stores. But your ride to the base would be, you know.
Yeah, the thing about these systems is that you cannot do much to train your ATP PC system. You can do some, maybe about, you can increase your abilities in this range to by about 20% with a lot of training. A lot of it is genetic, and a little bit of it is training. Yeah, right. There are also some genes and all that have been proven that actin-3. I don't know if you read about actin-3 gene, which is supposed to strengthen your PC system. And the athletes who are sprinters will tend to have 2 copies of that actin-3 gene in them, which makes them genetically endowed to be able to sprint at that power for that duration of time.
I definitely don't have to.
I've checked my genetics, by the way.
I don't want to.
Yeah, I don't have either. No surprises there. The other thing about the oxidative pathway is that something that you use in a brevet, for example. So a brevet, right, but that is in an untrained athlete, that's something you can train to improve even to the extent of 50%. So that's where you get your maximum gain. So if you start training, that's where you see your maximum gain. Anything else? Yeah, so the good thing about the aerobic system, although it's slower and it means that it takes more time, it produces more ATP than the anaerobic system. So it's a far more efficient system. Unfortunately, the anaerobic system, although it's quicker, gives us only 2 molecules of ATP per molecule of glucose. So that's an important thing to recognize. That when you're going anaerobic, you're going to need a lot more glucose than when you're going aerobic. Right? So that's the takeaway from this for you guys. When you start exercising and you're going at say 50% of VO2 max, there comes a point when up to 50% you would be using both glycolytic pathways and fat oxidative pathways to produce energy. At 50% of VO2 max, things start shifting. You start using less and less of fat and more of glucose. And at 90 to 100% of VO2 max, you're almost completely using only glucose, and that too you're using it anaerobically. So you're accumulating lactic acid. So these are some important figures here. I'm sorry I'm being very didactic, but this is important things for you guys to remember and know. So if you look at total body carbohydrate, 80% of our carbohydrate resides in our muscles, 14% in the liver and 6% in the blood. Okay. muscle glycogen in a given, say, a 70 kg man will give you about 1,500 calories of energy, beyond which you will vomit if you don't take in additional glucose. The energy from carbohydrate is about 4.1 calories per gram. Okay, so if you do a rough math, you have about 300 grams of glycogen in your muscles. Say 4 calories per gram is about 1200 calories. So 1200 to 1500 calories depending on your weight. Okay. From fat also you get a lot more calories per gram. And muscle glycogen can give you approximately 1200 to 2400 calories. It's the most stable glycogen because it does not fluctuate as much. Once glycogen is stored in your muscles, it does not leave your muscles unless you're exercising those muscles. Whereas liver glycogen is available for the entire body to use. So your brain needs glucose. Other parts of your body like your heart muscle, etc., they all need glucose constantly. That comes from the stored glycogen in your liver. So that keeps changing. So there's some other takeaways from here. For example, when you wake up on race day in the morning, traditionally your liver glycogen would have got depleted by the time you wake up. So your liver glycogen stores are nearly zero when you wake up in the morning because your body has been needing glucose to function right through the night. Whereas your muscle glycogen, provided you ate well the previous day, adequate amount of carbohydrate and protein, your muscle glycogen will usually be completely stored and it's more stable, so it's not going to change unless you're exercising, unless you decide to go for a ride previous evening, your muscle glycogen will remain stable. So when you eat your breakfast in the morning before a ride, you're really replenishing mostly your liver glycogen and you're doing nothing to your muscle glycogen. So it's important when you're planning a race to not just rely on your breakfast on the morning of the race. You have to rely on your nutrition for the 72 hours that lead up to your race. So that's crucially important also. Anything that?
Go back. Kind of just to really hammer home these points, because if you understand this, then you really kind of understand how much you need to eat during race. And Doc pretty much touched on everything, but just to kind of reiterate so everyone gets this. So total body carbohydrates. Now carbohydrates are kind of the most. It's not the most efficient. I mean, fat would be something that's kind of lasts you a very long time. But this is what most of us use on our rides, 3-hour rides, unless we're doing epic 6-hour.
Unless you're doing a keto diet and you've trained your body to use fat.
So let's not go into that. Yeah, deep sky stuff. But most of us are going to be fueling our efforts. Of course, the half iron and Ironman guys, you're talking a little bit different. But most of us are going to be using carbs to kind of fuel our efforts. And 80% of that, just reiterating, is in our muscle. Now, that's in muscle all over our body, not just in our limbs. Muscle glycogen is only available to the muscles that are being used. So while 80% of carbohydrates in our body is stored in our muscle, only about 30% of it is being used in cycling, right? So all of a sudden you look at that muscle glycogen, 1500 calories, you don't have that much. You have, say, about 40% of that, right? Or 50%, let's say 50. So that's 750 calories. And this is a 150 calorie bar, right? So if you think about it that way, just your lower limb exercise for the cyclists, you've got about 5 of these bars worth of energy in you when you wake up in the morning, right? So how much could you ride on 5 bars of this, you reckon? If you were riding at, if you were just using your carbs in your body. I'd say most of us be able to do 3.5, 4 with this, right? Nothing else, no breakfast, nothing. So that just gives you an idea of how much what we're talking in terms of quantities, right?
Plus you get some liver glycogen.
So then I was going to hit. So liver glycogen 14%. So that's something that you've got.
Yeah, I think that's about somewhere between 300 to 400 calories.
Exactly. And the other thing is the quick the unit thing. So one of the biggest confusions for me is kilocalories, calories, small c, big C, K, capital C, kilojoules. So boom, this is it. Okay, this is the secret, right? So everyone knows the prefix kilo means 1,000, right? Kilo means 1,000, and then you have joule, which is the unit of energy, right? So kilojoule, okay, how do you convert kilojoule to a kilocalorie, right? So whatever kilojoules you have, divide by 4, 4.18 gives you kilocalories, right? Kilocalories, kcal, which is the same as capital CAL.
Right.
So kilocalories, KCAL, is the same as CAL. Okay. So whenever you see these nutrition labels, it's always some of them. I mean, if you see the US nutrition label, you've got like kilojoules. You see a British one, you've got kilocalories.
Basic rule of thumb is a calorie is actually 1 kilocalorie.
Exactly.
Typical
Calorie is 1 kilocalorie, and if you're converting kilocalories to kilojoules, divide by 4, right? Well, if you're converting kilocalories to kilojoules, multiply by 4. Yeah, so good. So that'll.
So I talked about this. So above 50% of VO2 max is called the crossover point, where you stop using fat and you start using only glycogen. And once your carbohydrate stores run out, then you typically bonk. And this, however, can be delayed by supplementing orally. So that's the whole purpose of this talk, is how much, what, where, when, etc. So when you're racing and cycling, you're consuming approximately 2 to 3 grams of carbohydrate per minute. And when you're doing low intensity efforts, it's about 1 to 2 grams per minute. Because you can go into this in a little more detail by going grams per kilogram per minute. That's the most scientific way of doing it, because I'm making a generalized assumption here, assuming that you're a 60 to 70 kilogram person. This is how much should be burning. So ideally, you need to be replenishing carbohydrates at definitely somewhere between 30 to 60 grams per hour, probably even higher. The human body cannot absorb more than 60 to 80 grams of carbohydrate per hour anyway. So anything beyond that is likely to just, be wasted. But you should be looking at somewhere between 30 to 60 definitely, and a little more depending on the situation that you're in.
Okay. Question. You said human body cannot absorb beyond 60 calories, 80 calories per hour, right?
Yeah.
It goes as a basic.
80 grams.
Goes as a
80 grams.
80 grams.
The 60 to 80 grams.
Grams.
So if you want to convert it to calories, multiply by 4. Because 1 gram of carbs gives you 4 calories.
Yeah. So does it store as fat?
No, it gets out, it just doesn't get absorbed.
So two things
Because you're overwhelming the absorptive capacity of the intestines to absorb carbohydrate.
So then they said, what's the correlation when you have more carbs, you tend to gain weight?
Oh, that's different. That's if you don't use the carb, then it gets converted to fat.
Yeah. Good question. Yeah.
So preferably when you're riding, you should be replenishing carbohydrates at 30 to 60 grams per hour, and preferably a mix of fast and slow release carbs. I think Naveen will touch upon glycemic index and all that. So just to give you an idea, gels are about 60 to 22 grams per sachet. Your typical energy bars, I look at Yoga Bar and Nature Valley, they're about 30 grams. Banana, medium-sized banana is about 30 grams of carbohydrates. So 2 of those every hour is approximately what you would need. Okay, so now that we're done with any questions about carbohydrate, glycogen, glucose, etc., etc. Anybody have any questions about that? Everybody is clear how much of carbohydrate you need per hour when you're riding, racing?
Is it the same for everyone? For me, the metabolic rate is very high. Usually I have 84.
How do you know that the metabolic rate is high?
Actually, very simple. Just for a normal day.
So let's. It's a good question, because see, Doc addressed when he gave that number 2 grams, he mentioned that you can get more specific and say how many grams per kilogram of body weight, right?
Not during rides, just a normal day.
Basal metabolic weight.
Yeah, so like I keep getting very.
I do too.
I think that's true for everyone. but just a point to make.
If you're cycling and you're working out, you will feel hungry, because it means that your body is not eating enough.
Yeah.
Or it's just that your body is asking for more nutrients.
So a point I like to make here is grams per kilogram body weight. So basically, a heavier guy will actually need to eat more.
Yeah.
He's also doing more work on the bike. So he's going to eat more than a lighter rider. that becomes more true when you're going uphill and things like that. And yeah, that's the only point I think here.
I have a question, Doc. So you mentioned that every hour I need to replenish about 60 grams. I'm doing that kind of effort. So at what time, let's say I consume a banana, how long does it take to get into my bloodstream and body energy?
It's pretty instantaneous.
Okay.
It doesn't take too much time.
Yeah, it's about 20 minutes.
Yeah, but you should ideally plan your nutrition before you start. Don't start thinking about where to get your bananas after you ride. You should have an idea about how long you're going to be riding and how much you're going to need on this ride. You should make that calculation ideally the previous night and have everything ready. And you should know at what interval you should be eating. So the typical statement that everybody makes is drink before you're thirsty and eat before you're hungry. Right? So you do it irrespective of whether you feel hungry or feel thirsty. Just keep doing it. Okay, now I'm going to touch upon sodium, which is another controversial topic because we're talking hydration, nutrition, muscles, so sodium has got to do a lot with muscles. So when we talk about sweat and sweating and sweat rates, this is something that varies incredibly, a huge margin from person to person. So typical sweat rates range somewhere from a half liter to 1.5 liters per hour, depending again on many factors, genetics, your weight, your gender, the type of riding you're doing, the temperature, etc. etc. Typical concentration of sodium again is highly variable. It can vary from person to person, from species to species, from race to race, etc. etc. But it's somewhere between 450 to 2300 milligrams per liter of sweat. But the average is about 1150 milligrams per liter. This is a ballpark figure. So this is just to give you an idea about how much sodium you're losing in your sweat every hour and how much you should be replenishing and how you should be doing this. So assuming you're sweating at 1.5 liters per hour, you'll be losing about 1700 milligrams of sodium per hour. So you have to put this back in somehow, or else you're going to cramp, right? Because your muscles and your nerves depend a lot on sodium for contraction. So the recommended concentration of sodium in a replacement drink is about 300 to 700 milligrams per liter. So if you were to do this at home, if you were to mix half a teaspoon of salt in 1 liter of water, you would get the equivalent of 1200 milligrams per liter. So it's a lot more than your regular sports drink. So bear that in mind, because too much sodium is not necessarily better for you. Too little is certainly not good, too much is also bad. So you need to find the right balance. So there are various ways of figuring out how much you sweat. There are some sweat tests that you can read up about and give you an idea. You can also analyze your sweat for how much sodium there is in it. Not easy to do, not many labs do that, but if you can at least gauge your sweating rate, then you can make some rough calculations about how much sodium you should be putting back. So nobody can give you a straight answer about how much you should be drinking on the bike. It's something you have to figure out for yourself. Right? The important thing is carbohydrates in the energy drinks are usually added for two reasons. One is they enhance the absorption of sodium. So they improve the body's ability to absorb the sodium that you're drinking. The second is, what I'm coming to is sports drink osmolality. So osmolality is nothing but the concentration of your sports drink, right? So you can have a sports drink that's very sweet or a sports drink that's very insipid, depending on the quantity of sugar in it. So the optimal osmolality of a sports drink should be somewhere between 270 to 330, which is the same osmolality as your blood or your body fluids. The reason being, if you try take a very concentrated solution, add a lot of sugar, add a lot of salt, and make a sports drink very concentrated, then all that's going to happen is it's going to, when it stays in your stomach, it's only going to draw in fluid. It's going to draw in water into your stomach. It's going to make you bloated, and it's actually going to dehydrate you rather than hydrate you. So it's going to achieve the opposite effect. So it's very important to understand that the osmolality of your sports drink has to be in the optimal range. So there are lots of sports drinks out there which are not necessarily in the right proportions.
Is it mentioned on the sports drink?
No.
So osmolality is never mentioned. So it's one of those things that as an athlete, you require, one way is you test and try and experiment. There isn't. That's the thing with sports drinks, and it's an accepted kind of out of athletes. It's kind of they're like, why the hell don't you just tell us how much? But the thing is, it's unique to everyone, so there isn't that one formula.
Yeah, also is so depends to some extent. Also, a lot of these sports drinks are available as sachets. So it all depends on how much water you put in them. So if you change the concentration of the water, it will change the osmolarity also. So it's never a good idea to try and go away from what the manufacturer's recommendation is. So
if they say,
for example, in FastandUp, they say 2 tablets for 500 ml of water. So you do less than that, you're going hypoosmolar. You do more than that, you're going hyperosmolar. Both are not necessarily the right thing for you to be doing. Okay. The other thing that you should definitely avoid is never supplement energy through your sports drink. This is a common mistake I think that a lot of us began by. I started off doing it. I used to think, I don't want to eat on the bike. I'm not comfortable. Gels are expensive. Let me try and drink my nutrition, right? Easy way. Just one bottle. It's the wrong thing to do. We've all been through it. I suffered with incredibly bad cramps because of it. So you add more sugar, thinking that the sugar will give you energy. It's actually not going to do anything for you. It might give you energy, but it's also going to dehydrate you by causing fluid to be drawn into your stomach. And it's going to cause you to cramp and bloat up and feel healthy. So always separate your sports drink and your nutrition. They're two different things. Do not try to mix up the two.
Yeah. So that's a point that's super critical to understand. It's eat your food and drink. So don't try to drink too many of your calories. Basically, that's what Doc is trying to say. Eat your food and drink your hydration. Keep it separate, right? Because when you start to put a lot of sugar into your drink, which is replacing electrolytes, right? All of a sudden in your gut, it's not just a concentration of electrolytes, but it's also the sugar that's in there, right? And to be absorbed into your body across the gut membrane, water from your body is brought into the mix to kind of get it isotonic, and then it's brought in. So you're essentially dehydrating
using water to get a little less water.
So this is a personal experience. I'm not taking a pot shot at a particular product. Enerzal, for example, has a pretty high amount of glucose in it.
Yeah.
And if you taste it, it has a real high level of sweetness to it. And for the longest time, I couldn't figure out why I was cramping before even I would get to the base of my Nandi-Rex, and that's what it was, So what I had to do is initially I had to dilute my Enerzal so that it would become a little bit more iso to my gut concentration, so it would be absorbed and hydrate me as opposed to dehydrate. Because if you just and so it becomes very important to follow those instructions that you have on the package. They seem like a trivial thing, but it's important because that's critical to how they've done some science there. So trust them on that.
The other important thing is that we're using gels, right? So you know there are 2 types of gels, isotonic and the regular gels. Again, with gels, you can end up with this problem of hypertonicity because if you look at gels which are non-isotonic gels, they're very concentrated. And if you don't chase them down with the right amount of water, that's going to dehydrate you again. So it's critical to understand all these gels have recommendations about how much water you should have to chase the gel down. Or you just go with isotonic gels which are already balanced, you don't need to chase them down with water at all.
Yeah. So to add to that, so basically the gels like Doc was talking about, the isotonic gels are the ones that are really runny. You almost you feel there. So those of you who use gels, you probably know. You get them, they typically come in higher volume packets, and they are runnier.
So high five and SIS. And
high five SIS has a couple. And then if you look at Goo is a pretty popular brand that is a gel that they actually say on the rip-off part, drink 250 ml with each Goo. Otherwise you're going to set yourself up for some gut rot and some dehydration. The other thing, and this is kind of a general rule, eat your calories and drink your hydration becomes so much more important in hot conditions, because that's when your GI tract is under so much more stress, and just conditions like dehydration are more likely to happen. So following that rule of, you can get away with it in cold weather a little bit more. This is speaking from personal experience and the science of it. In hot weather, that rule of separate nutrition and hydration becomes all the more important.
Okay, so this is about what I have to say on the bike. I have a couple of slides on recovery and re-rates. Should we do that now? Or would you like to go ahead and then?
Let's, yeah, so the way I want to do this part is kind of just open up the floor to questions with regards to nutrition and hydration. The thing is, I thought about addressing different kinds of events like time trials, criteriums, road races, relays, kind of ultra endurance stuff. But I think the better way to do it would be, because it's so unique, maybe just ask you guys to kind of, what questions you have regarding what you've heard so far. Is there anything that's confusing? Yeah.
I missed the one about salt and water at home.
Yeah.
So,
On the spot.
So yeah, if you add half teaspoon of salt to a liter of water, it gives you about 1200 milligrams of sodium concentration. And the most sports drinks have about 300 to 700.
For example, a FastandUp tab has 250 milligrams.
180.
Check it out. Check it before I get it.
Per tablet is 180, so 2 in 2 in 500 ml, so that's 360, and 360. In the liter it's 720.
Yeah. Okay. 720.
That's milligrams though.
That's milligrams. Yeah.
Right.
Milligrams.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So whereas half a tablespoon of table salt has
Half a teaspoon of salt is 1200.
1200. Yeah.
So that's a lot more than you think.
Yeah.
I mean, you think half a teaspoon, right? It's like nothing, but the concentration is too much.
Yeah.
So you're probably better off with a quarter teaspoon than with a half teaspoon of salt.
So another thing with regards to kind of, again, just kind of practical thing from my experience with Gatorade, right? So Gatorade has additives for color and flavors, right? So that goes back to osmolarity again. Whenever you add something to a liquid, it changes the osmolarity. Whether it's an electrolyte, whether it's a molecule of sugar, whether it's a molecule of flavor, whether it's a molecule of color, right? So Gatorade is a drink that has, besides electrolytes in the right concentration, it's also got that. So that's something you need to keep in mind. The only way to really find out what concentration of Gatorade works for you is to trial and error. For example, if you're using Gatorade. So
if you really want to go high tech, you can buy an osmometer, which is nothing but a lactometer, right? What they use to check adulteration of milk. Yeah. That's definitely an osmometer. Yeah. So you can just pick that in your Gatorade or whatever your thing, and just make sure it's in the 270 to 300 to 330 range.
So you want to get rated. So, for example, one of the biggest proteins in the world, well, now all of them pretty much, but carbon cannondale, for example, when Alan Lim is a sports scientist who's done quite a bit of work in kind of hydration, the realm of hydration for endurance athletes. And one of the things that he found was, I mean, sports drinks are great, but you really have to find out what works for you. So, for example, even if FastandUp says, 2 tabs per 500 ml, you have to tweak it to find out what is perfect for you. For example, for me, I typically go hypotonic on my FastandUp. So I go 70 ml, I do 2 tabs. Even on a hot day, I do that. So yeah, you've got to figure it out.
But yeah, these are just guidelines, but ultimately you have to figure out your nutrition, hydration strategies yourself. Figure out, use various products, use various combinations, see what works for you. Given that there are other factors that can influence the outcome. So maybe a day when you're well rested, your performance is better. It doesn't necessarily mean because you tweak your life or your nutrition, it happened that way. But just to keep in mind that there's no one formula fits all. So it comes with experience. It took me, I still don't know whether I figured out my nutrition completely, but 7 years and I'm still, learning new things. But yeah, but just play with things.
I have a good question.
Yeah.
So you mentioned like experimenting nutrition with various products. So what are the red flags?
With what products?
Hydration products.
Right.
Yeah. So what are the red flags involved?
So what are the things you look for, right? I mean, the most obvious one is cramping. I mean, because you're replacing electrolytes, and one of the causes for cramping, and that's just one. I think Doc and I were just chatting about this, and we were hoping someone would ask the questions like,
somebody's asked a question.
Somebody has a question. Yes, yeah. So I cramp, and like, how do I deal with it, right? But one of the red flags is cramping. If you're cramping, you're probably not near your hydration. Any other red flags that come
Just
from
bloating is one. Like you feel like you're bloated or you want to throw up, you just like your GI is not settling down, not comfortable. That could be one more.
So that GI bloating that you feel happens from water retention. So when we talked about kind of putting in a high osmotic drink in your gut, that's water kind of you're feeling your gut. It's not quite empty. You think you're hydrating, but it's not emptying your gut. So that's bloating is another good sign. You kind of
just a feeling you're going to bonk. That could be to do with magnesium, potassium. Those can also play a role.
So apart from the biochemistry, physiologically, how about not stretching before a ride? Do you think those can also?
Okay, so that's another.
Let's go to that.
It's like,
so you're saying this is stretching a cause for
not stretching.
Not stretching a cause for cramping.
Yeah.
We will address that in the recovery part.
Okay.
Things like that. Yeah.
as long as you follow these scientific guidelines when you're trying out different products, you should be all right. As long as you figure out what your carbohydrate intake per hour should be, what your sweat rate is, that's something you figure out on your own, right? Because you need a weighing scale, you need a controlled environment and all that. So you can read about the sweat test and how to figure that out yourself and figure out how much sweat you are losing in 1 hour and then base your hydration on that. As long as you follow these guidelines and you try different products and see which one works for you.
So a good way to know if you're a heavy sweater is pretty obvious, right? If you look at your clothing after a ride, and the best part is you do it with a group of people. That's a good indicator because we're the human population and the human population follows a bell curve. So if you take a group of 20 riders and you all go on the same ride to Nandi and back, and you're the only guy you started off with a black jersey, and your jersey's white at the end of the ride, you're probably on that far end of the bell curve, and then you are the outlier. And then you it's it's one of just common sense. I'm just kind of looking.
So this happened to me also. At the end of every ride,
he's the guy.
I had like salt. I was like encrusted with salt. Like somebody had put me on a platter, fried me, like salt encrusted baked fish or something. Yeah. And for the life of me, I couldn't figure out what to do about it. So I finally figured out that I was a heavy sweater and I was losing a lot of sodium in my sweat. And then I used a product called Salt Stick, which I still use till today, and I use it extensively on the Tour of Friendship. And I cramped in 1 day, in 4 days, and in extreme heat. So I think,
Tour of Friendship is extreme conditions. That's like no sane person would ride. Only very sensible. Okay, so I've kept your question of stretching, not stretching, cramping. So any other? So Sarvesh is a good question. Like, what signs do you look for? One is dehydration. That's an indication that you're not putting enough electrolytes in you. Cramping, that's a good indication that you're not putting enough electrolytes in you. Bloating is an indication that there is perhaps too much sugar in your drink, right? So those are two indicators. So then you can tweak based on that. So questions regarding that? Yeah, Ashok.
You've got you talk primarily about hydration during the ride, but you've got something before the ride. You're coming 2 hours for the ride, and the night before
you're coming.
We'll address that as well. Yeah, it's in the next part of the thing. So anything with regards to any ride.
So like a lot of times you guys go for numbers and grams, right? What about is there like some kind of if you're doing like half an hour riding, that's when stuff like this kicks in? Because at some point you need to worry about this.
Yeah.
Right? So how do you figure out that?
Should I address that? So like so for the 60, I mean if you're doing an hour or an hour's worth of exercise at pretty much whatever intensity, hydration doesn't in exercise hydration doesn't matter as much. In the short efforts like the TCS 10Ks next weekend, some of you are probably doing that. Most of you will take around the hour plus or minus 10 minutes, right? And how you perform on race day in an effort like that is all to do with your pre-race hydration and your pre-race day fueling. In race, you don't even need to drink water for a 1 hour effort. But now here's the part. Say you're doing a 1 hour intense ride. Context. This is where context comes in. Should you hydrate on a 1 hour ride? In and of itself, probably no. But what if you're training 6 days a week and you got another session tomorrow? So that comes into play for guys who are training for Ironmans or maybe training for the BCH race coming up this weekend. And you're not just a fitness kind of guy, but you're looking at training. Training implies consistency, back-to-back days. Then that 1 hour session in hydration becomes important. For example, like me, like today I didn't have time to do my 5 hour ride, so I did a 1 hour session on the trainer. And it was just 1 hour really intense, And
so I have a question here. Would you hydrate with just pure water for 1 hour ride, or would you hydrate with liquid?
So today I went with 750 ml 2 FastandUps and 500 ml of plain water. The reason is tomorrow I've got a pretty hard session. Actually, when I go home, I got a little cold session, right? So it comes back to context. If you're just looking at riding as fitness, you don't need to you don't need to be doing fast enough or any hydration thing for a 1 hour ride. But context, if you're doing something tomorrow, maybe you have a second workout in the day, maybe you have work, you don't want to be going to work.
Or you're doing it in very hot conditions.
Yeah, the weather out there right now, you don't want to end up with a deficit at the end of that hour. So I would say, even for an hour ride, I know it's a very non-Indian thing to say, but think about your hydration, and it is important. And even for an hour ride, yeah, So another thing is, how many of you go to the gym? Just a quick raise of hands. Do strength training. So Sarvesh, you got athletes in place. Yeah. So even if you're doing a 30-minute gym session and it's not a cardio session, you're sweating. The question, actually, to answer the question is really simple. If you are sweating, i.e., water is being lost, electrolytes are being lost, the simple answer is you have to put something in. That's it. That's the way I kind of answer that question. Yeah.
Another question. This is regarding the physiology of the body. While sweating, the purpose of sweat is to cool down the temperature. Why does the body release salts?
I don't know the answer. Why we lose salt in sweat, but I don't know the answer to that question, but we do, and we just need to figure that out.
So I think the reason we lose salt through sweat is this, and don't quote me on this. But it's an ion channel mechanism, because how you lose sweat,
that's how you lose sweat. But
and the only way you can lose sweat is if you lose. So the way you lose, so when you lose water, it's the human body, right? There are cells, so it's not like a rubber dropper that squeezes out water, right? It's connected to the rest of your body, and it's channeled, right? How do channels operate in the body? It's sodium and it's pumps, right? It's ion pumps and things like that. And at the skin level, you've got sweat glands, and I think it's just that. And don't quote me on this.
but ideologically, why should you lose salt?
Yeah, so that's why I have no idea what it is. So this is like the discussion part. This is not the expert part of the series. So Ashok, we'll answer your question in the next part. But any questions regarding in-ride, hydration, nutrition? Yeah.
So, like during winter, when I was mixing my Gatorade with water, half a liter for 150 rupees. So I said, okay. Now, I feel slightly dehydrated because it's summer, so I should slightly increase my.
That's so. Yeah, you got to remember, Gatorade's got quite a bit of calories in there also. So, and I said, as heat increases, that GI distress or that stress increases. So maybe the solution isn't just upping your Gatorade concentration. Maybe it means switching to a drink like FastandUp, which in terms of calories.
The most important thing that I think alters the osmolality is sugar.
Exactly. Sugar alters the sugar molecule is a big ass molecule. Sodium is just one atom, right? Yeah. Sugar is boom, big, right? So yeah.
So on my slide it says that sugar plays the bigger role in controlling the osmolality of the sports drink. That's why most of the sports drinks will have 6 to 8% of sugar in them. That's just to control osmolality. It's not meant to provide you energy.
So the solution to tweaking your Gatorade mix in hot conditions or conditions where you're dehydrating might not be to add more Gatorade. It might be to look at other alternatives. So maybe adding a pinch of salt to your drink, which doesn't add calories, but adds, just the electrolyte. So you got to think it's almost like, and that's the way you want to take this talk, just kind of feed you the facts so that you can kind of hook up your own kind of solutions. Yeah. Yeah.
So I come across a lot of athletes
they train without water and without nutrition. If I ask primary reason, they say I want to burn calories, I want to lose weight. Is it a good idea to train without water and nutrition?
I mean, one second. Yeah, no, no. Okay, so this is an anecdote. So, so this is a ride that I did when I went to Bijapur. I was training with the state team guys, and we did a 4-hour ride. It was 120 kilometers. So basically, a really fast ride, right? And really hot. And one of the guys on the Naveen, Karapati, right? Yeah. One bottle of water, but that guy finished the ride, and it's pretty amazing what the human body can do. But that doesn't necessarily mean you should be doing it now, or it's ideal, because the next day he was toast, and I did a 160k ride, that's he had to take a rest day. So it's all about, that big picture. Yeah, you can do. The human body can do a lot of things. You can push it to quite some limits, but let's. He also didn't have to go to work, for the entire day. You just sleep. So I mean, no, it's never recommended that you train without water. I mean,
is there any time period that you recommend? It's okay. People say train for the work. I did come across such articles.
Any article that says I'm not like the world. I don't know. Just resource in terms of hydration, but I know that anyone who makes any sense won't say that. Because, and that comes to training, goes a little bit outside training and nutrition, but stressing the body and, in different ways is one thing, but if you're not going to get the max out of yourself in a training session, it's not going to help you get stronger.
It's actually going to impair your body's adaptation to the stress of training.
To the stress of training, exactly.
So what happens is, when you're not fueling your body in the right way, with the right amount of water, sodium and carbohydrate, your body is not going to adapt to the training stress as well as it would if you had provided everything to it.
So quick thing,
Sorry, I'm not sure if I got this right.
Yeah.
I understand that electrolytes and energy bars in sleep and the water proportionally plastic and that has to be but what about water? Not very sure. So like me drinking water separately and then electrolytes.
Figure out your sweat rate.
Yeah, that's one.
Will the water not be supplemented with the electrolyte solution itself?
Correct. Yeah. So you're asking how much water, right? We talked about how much you have to drink and things like that. So yeah, like Tom said, sweat rate. So 0.5 to 1.5 liters of water per hour, right? That's the approximate amount of liquid we use along with electrolytes. And the amount of electrolytes we used was 450 to 2,300 milligrams, depending on. So half a liter to 1.5 liters is what we use typically. How much you lose depends on the intensity of exercise. For example, bigger guys with more fat under their subcutaneous fat lose more, sweat more, right? Because fat tends to store heat, so our body sweats more. Because sweating is basically a mechanism that the body uses to cool down. Because when sweat evaporates from our skin, right, the body cools down. So bigger guys, guys with a little bit more, subcutaneous fat under the skin are going to sweat more. So you'll be closer to the 1.5 or sometimes in some cases 2. You're going to sweat more. And the lighter guys are going to sweat in, rule of thumb, less. But you can have a light guy who's a heavy sweater.
So you may have a separate bottle of water and separate.
So you're saying how much water and how much drink mix, right? Very, 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 very subjective, right? So there was this really cool sticker, there was a really cool picture from the Giro d'Italia. So it's a space that's happening in Italy. And there was this team that they have, in proteins, they have soigneurs, guys who mix, do all the food and stuff. So it's a really cool sticker that one of the Stony uses. He's got there's 8 guys on the team. And every rider starts with 2 bottles, right? And every single rider, he made a note of what they want on the bike. So some guys wanted water with water, some guys wanted mixed water, some guys wanted water and a mix, some guys wanted water and water. So it's so subjective, And that's that was just, you can picture that picture that I just described. It's so subjective. But typically you've got 2 bottle cages in your bike. I want you to go through that. If they're both 500 ml bottles, on average, I'd say you want to go through that, a liter an hour. That's a rule of thumb. That's like the minimum, I would say, When it's really cold, maybe it come down. When it's really hot, it'll go up to a liter and a half. That's rule of thumb, So I coach Sarvesh, and that's one of the things we spend quite a bit of time trying to figure out how much water do you need. I think now we're coming close to that point where you figured it out, right? And it took us about 2 months of structured training and figuring out, things like that, and finally getting close to nailing it,
And excessive water consumption should not be consumed.
Say that again. Excessive water consumption. Yeah. So excessive water consumption. Excessive water consumption is harmful, right? Well, you really have to drink a lot of water. You really have to drink a lot of water. I mean, so the sweat rate, he says half a liter to a liter and a half. On a hot day, maybe it's 2 liters. Really hot day, and you're riding really hard. You would have to drink 4 liters, 3 to 4 liters. I mean, like consistently over multiple hours to mess up something in your body, I would say.
Well, that would be difficult.
Yeah.
At worst, you'll have to stop for a beat.
Exactly. Yeah, the body regulates, self-regulates. So, unless you don't do anything that's out of the ordinary, there's the average. There's kind of a reasonable kind of amount that you can go below that. So, not a risk, not a real risk. Yeah.
Last 2 questions.
Yeah.
First one is, they say do not mix water and electrolyte because the oxygen absorption will be delayed or affected. I'm not sure.
That's not true at all.
Okay, that's true. So that's what I wanted to share.
Yeah. No, I can't see that anyway because one is a gut lining. And the other one oxygen energy production happens on the muscle level, kind of heart and lungs, tissue level. Yeah. It's 2 different systems,
But
so yeah.
and also last one, coming to nutrition part, considering short, mid, and long duration workout, what is the appropriate mix of carbohydrates and the protein?
Protein. Okay.
Suggested.
I mean, so protein for riding, for endurance rides, unless you're doing incredibly long endurance rides, and I'm talking about 6 hours, like brevet territory, right? Then you start talking about adding proteins to your nutrition on the bike, or even your drink mix, for example. You might, but any event that Ironman distance. If you're one of those Ironman finishers, you would probably want to, if you're spending 13 hours, 11 hours out there, you'd want to think about supplementing protein. That would definitely be. But I'm not talking ratios. I don't want to go into because I don't know, to be honest.
That's a very good topic.
But for the average cyclist, doesn't
How
come.
much protein?
And it is controversial,
So consumption of proteins should not be causing cramp in your stomach because it takes a little more time for digestion.
Yeah, that's another problem with protein. Yeah, it changes the
You
osmolality.
put protein in your drink, osmolality changes. Protein is a massive molecule, right? So it is definitely going to affect kind of the emptying rates.
Protein drinks just work on this problem.
And like I said, depends on the event you're doing. If you're not doing any ultra endurance stuff, then that question of protein in your drink doesn't even come up. So what event are you specifically talking about?
Maybe if it is a very high endurance group, like say, so if you are doing a training for like 2 hours, maybe, then
2-hour run, not protein supplementation is not required.
You're doing ultra
that's for the reason of acclimatization.
Reason of
Acclimatization.
no.
Adapting.
No.
Protein is really to repair tissue damage, right? Muscle damage and tissue damage, and to restore muscle cells. That's the role of protein in your energy drink. If at all you have to put it in there. So if you're doing really long events, that's when muscle damage is happening during the event. If you're doing a 2-hour run, nothing is not that you need to repair your muscle damage right away. You can always wait till you finish the event and then you can have your protein drink.
Yeah, because any protein you put into your gut, say you're doing a 3-hour, well, no one does a 3-hour marathon here, but say you're doing a 3:30 marathon, right? And the question you're asking, do you need to have protein in your drink? The answer is no, because while you are running, you need to fuel your body. While you are running, you're using glycogen as an energy source. Maybe if you're running really slow, you're going to the fat oxidation, right? 50% of your max is 50% fat and 50% carbohydrates. If you're doing a slow run, like a 345, you're getting your energy from fats and carbohydrates. Protein only comes into the equation when? I mean, when you run out of fat and you run out of carbs, nobody in this room is going to run. We're not elite athletes.
You have to do like something like 100,000 calories worth of exercise.
Actually, the exact
100,000 calories.
Approximate number is about 52,000 calories. I was just actually reading that before I came. It's a random fact that I picked up. But yeah, 52,000 for the average person. 70 kilo person with about 15-20% body fat. 52,000 kilojoules. Not happy. So yeah. So no. So if that question isn't answered, we'll talk about it later. Yeah, go ahead.
What if on a long ride, you intentionally use your anaerobic system? Say you're churning a big air when you don't need to, when you can easily say ride on a low air. Does it help improve your anaerobic system?
That's a training specific question. Maybe I'll answer that later. It's a training question as opposed to a nutrition hydration thing. So definitely remind me and I'll answer that. Yeah, I think we'll move on to the next part.
Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about recovery. So recovery is what happens after you finish your training ride or your race, right? Especially if you're doing a stage race, you're doing multiple back-to-back days, then recovery is crucially important. So you have to remember that by the time you finish your ride, even though you would have replaced glucose or carbohydrates by drinking on the bike, your muscle glycogen is pretty much over. So is your liver glycogen. So this is the time, the first 2 to 4 hours after you finish your ride is critical to replenishing your glycogen. It's very important if you want to ride the next day or train the next day particularly. That 2-hour window is when your body is going to maximally put back glycogen into your muscles and your liver. Okay. So ideally you should be taking 1 gram per kg of your body weight. So if you're a 70 kg person, you need to take about 70 grams of carbohydrate per hour for 4 hours after your workout. And then over the next 24 hours, you take 10 grams per kg. Okay. So that by the time the next morning, when you're ready for your next day or your next workout, your glycogen is maximally replenished. This is where addition of proteins or amino acids is useful, because proteins and amino acids helps to repair the damage that happened during your workout and during your exercise. Also, caffeine has been shown to help recovery, right? It helps to repair damage and has a lot of other effects. So yeah, the other important thing about recovery is glutathione. So if you look at the recovery product from FastandUp, it contains L-glutathione. So L-glutathione is, apart from being an amino acid, it's a very important anti-inflammatory agent. So what really happens when you're exercising hard is you're taking a lot of oxygen and you're breathing harder, and your oxygen is producing what is known as superoxides, right? So these superoxides are produced during hard efforts, and these are actually inflammatory mediators. They cause a chain reaction which causes inflammation of your tissues, your ligaments, your muscles, etc. Glutathione helps to repair the injury that occurs because of these pro-inflammatory mediators. Okay, and it's also got some other good effects like anti-aging, anti-cancer, etc., etc. So it's just a good product to have. I've been using Recover. It's an excellent product.
Explain why you look young.
Right. Thanks. Maybe I should go into the old category this time. So it really makes your muscle soreness.
It doesn't have hair loss.
No, it doesn't. Not in the head at least.
It helps with ED though. Yeah.
And it certainly helps muscle soreness, helps recovery, just gets you ready for the next day. So it's an excellent product to be using, in my opinion.
Just a quick question on the recovery nutrition. So when I finish a ride, let's say I'm not riding tomorrow, do I still need to have that many number of carbohydrates?
Yeah, ideally you should. It's just to keep your muscle glycogen stored. And also it has some, it does repair some damage. You need to take some protein in, a good protein carbohydrate mix kind of meal is a good thing to have after a ride. Just to make sure that you don't suffer any unnecessary injuries and so on, strain.
And again, is there a certain mix of simple and complex carbs?
Generally complex carbs. Generally complex carbs. So you don't take a lot of sugar, but you eat basically food with a lower to moderate glycemic index, because you don't want like a rush of insulin spike, which is not good for your body. So you have a mix of low and moderate glycemic index carbs, like typically baked potatoes and meat, that sort of thing. Not a very Indian dish, but I mean, biryani is as good as anything.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Brown rice instead of basmati.
Yeah, but biryani is like a great recovery food.
Arvind, this was a water was sponsored by the biryani house.
I belong to Team Spectrum, which is like crazy about biryani.
You should get a biryani sponsor. Good.
So that's about what I have for recovery. Do you have anything?
Recovery. Yeah, I mean, just go back a slide. And another slide, the one where I have the number forward. Yeah. So yeah, that number 1 kg per kilogram per hour.
1 gram.
1 gram per 1 kg per. Yeah, so 1 gram per kilogram. So that's another thing you really have to figure out again. If you're looking at gaining muscle, right? Then you would go into a situation like if you're training really hard. For example, I shoot for around 2 when I'm training really hard.
Yeah.
Otherwise, 1.5 is where I keep it at per gram. And the two things I make sure I get is my carbs and my protein, because protein repairs the muscle damage that you've done. Carb fuels you for the.
You can also add a little bit of fat if you have some like simple sugars or simple carbohydrates. If you can add a little bit of fat, that tends to delay the absorption of the simple sugars. So you add like maybe a teaspoon of butter or something in your. That's where the biryani is.
Yeah, I mean, most of us are not in any danger of not taking enough fat in our diet.
Yeah. Okay. Basically, you need to be sensible about your recovery. It's really eating good, wholesome meals is all that it takes. Really, nothing special.
Yeah, that's
Should I go into pre-ride now?
Yeah, let's go to pre-ride.
Okay, so I think one slide about pre-ride. So like I was telling you, muscle glycogen is unaffected overnight. So it all depends on what you do the previous day that determines how much of muscle glycogen you have on the morning of your race or your ride. But liver glycogen gets depleted. So that's important to replenish that before you start riding. So the ideal window of eating before a ride is somewhere between 3 to 4 hours before a race or a ride. Of course, this is particularly true for a race. It may not be so much for a training ride, because it's really not going to be, probably not that demanding, depending on how long your ride is and how intense it is. You may need to fuel up well in advance before your ride. So 3 to 4 hours before your race or ride, because you want your breakfast to be completely digested. You want your gut to be relatively comfortable when you start racing or riding. You want your glycogen to be stored where it's supposed to be and ready for use. You want your insulin levels to be stable and not spiking just before you start riding. So typically your pre-race breakfast should be somewhere between 200 to 400 calories. Should not have too much of fiber. Should not have too much of simple sugars, relatively low glycemic to moderate glycemic index foods. Typically oats and a fruit. Maybe you can add a little bit of honey to your breakfast. It's important to understand that you should not take in any sugary stuff in the 3 hours before your race. So, taking in a drink that's got a lot of sugar or taking in something that spikes your insulin is bad for you, because the insulin surge that happens before you start riding is actually going to mess up your muscle glycogen. So all your eating should be ideally done before 3 hours, and after 3 hours, at most you can just sip an electrolyte drink which gives you a little bit of sugar, and You can eat a snack about 1 hour before you arrive, which has to be something which is relatively not going to affect your insulin levels.
So 3 to 4 hours before meals, I typically wake up
Early.
early.
You have to wake up another 3 hours.
Then go sleep.
Yeah.
Again. Okay.
Oh, yeah, you can stay up if you want. Watch a movie or something.
What about coffee?
Yeah, coming to that.
Question regards to the recovery protein. So I don't know if it's true, but yeah. So if you have not given your body a required tension and make excessive proteins, it settles in the liver.
So what happens to excess protein if you do take it in? Is it just gets converted, either gets converted into energy, that's called gluconeogenesis. So the body can use protein to produce energy, but it's the last resort. So first is glucose, second is fat, third is protein. Alternatively, protein can get converted into protein stores, or it gets converted into fat. So nothing else really happens.
So this is with regards to supplements where protein comes from.
So how much how much protein is bad for you, basically, right?
Too much protein.
So think about, so this is the answer to that question again. And it's similar in the same vein as the question that Rohan had, how much water do you drink? So the answer to these questions is how much did you just lose, and that's how much you put in. So what's the demand, and you supply that demand, right? So, so we use half a liter, so I put in half a liter into water, right? Similarly with protein, there was that number the doc put up about what's recommended, dietary recommendation. For inactive people, it's like half a gram, for people who are moderately active, probably a gram. People who are training hard, probably a gram and a half, 2 grams if you're training really hard, Ironman level training, or weight training, things like that. I mean, 3 if you're like bodybuilding and stuff, 3, 4, 5. But if you're going above 5 grams per kilogram, that's where you're putting in more than your body has the ability to kind of take on to repair muscle. It's a bottleneck, right?
Yeah. I think also what you're trying to say is, so there is a metabolic load when you take in too much protein, because protein ultimately gets broken down into nitrogen. So you get these nitrogen products, so uric acid, nitrogen, these are all the byproducts of protein. If you take in too much, it can actually put a lot of strain on your kidneys.
Right.
Because the kidneys have to excrete the nitrogen. Right? So there you should be probably very careful about overeating protein.
So for us endurance athletes, no reason to go above 2.5.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, elite athletes, Miranda Coffey, I've read her, I follow her pretty closely. Chrissy Wellington, I've read her autobiography. Yeah, those guys do 2.5. I mean, those are like elite endurance, right? So they really found their body. So if you're an endurance athlete, I can say safe. I don't know about bodybuilding and things like that. It's out of my realm.
So coffee, so one of my favorite drinks. 60 minutes before the race or a ride, about 3 to 6 milligrams per kg. So what are the Starbucks? Okay, what is your coffee which you're having is what? 180 milligrams?
Yeah, sugar.
180 milligrams. So that's approximately what you could be having.
Short of espresso, basically.
Yeah. One shot of espresso would be about, I think 100.
Yeah, 100 milligrams.
1 hour before.
Ideally 1 hour before. Because caffeine makes you go to the bathroom a little bit. So
something that is very less discussed amongst endurance athletes is creatine usage. So what is it?
creatine usage.
Yeah, so consumption of creatine monohydrate.
Creatine monohydrate. That's in like recovery.
In recovery.
In recovery.
Recovery water intention.
Yeah. To be
I'm not
honest,
so sure about
I
that.
don't know the answer to that either. I don't even dabble with
I know about amino acids and whey protein
Same
recovery,
here.
but
Same
not
here.
much about creatine.
That's kind of personally.
That's more I think used with the bodybuilders and stuff, like after a hard.
Yeah,
Usually the fat burning
Oh, fat burning. Okay.
creatine goes into that phase.
Yeah, creatine does supposed to.
Even if you're cycling through the month, I mean, I don't mean actual cycling, but if you're doing the creatine cycles, how does that work? Does that help?
Good question, and I don't know the answer. Sorry.
We'll have to find out and let you know.
Yeah.
Next session.
Yeah. And then of course beet juice. So beet juice is supposed to work by producing or giving you nitrates. So nitrates are substances that enhance the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood, and it's supposed to give you a massive boost. It's come into the pro peloton in a big way in the last couple of years or so. Still, there are some people who do not believe that beet juice is of any benefit at all. There are enough studies showing it to be extremely useful, and there are enough studies showing it to be absolutely useless. So it's up to you. Doing it at home can be a bit of a tough challenge. Not easy to get beet juice at home. Buying commercially is probably the best option. But I think I would reserve something like that for only a race day if at all.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of beets, just in terms of nutrition.
Just eating it.
Yeah, pretty much. I do have to eat a lot. Maybe for you have to eat a lot to get the amounts. Yeah, but I just include my daily diet. Yeah, that's part of my salad. Fridays and weekends. Yeah.
And then there are molecules like arginine, carnitine, which can also boost performance. So arginine is supposed to improve the blood flow, improve the cardiac performance. So that's a good pre-workout thing to have because it gets your body ready and warmed up. Carnitine is important for using fat. It's important in one of the metabolic pathways that causes heat oxidation. So when you want to use fat for producing energy, carnitine is very important to make sure you have enough of carnitine in your body to do that. So if you're doing a race, for example, it's crucially important. Again, the pre-workout is something I use sparingly, most likely before a hard ride or a race. So otherwise, I don't generally use the pre-workout formula for a training ride. So I think we'll be seeing a lot of this guy.
Well, we'll see.
Do you want to say something about pre-ride? Yeah, best rides are the ones where you bite off much more than you can chew and live through it, which is what I did 5 days.
Yeah, life. So pre-ride, no, I think we pretty much touched everything that I want to touch. I mean, I guess that opens it up to, again, kind of the same format as we did for the first part, questions regarding nutrition and pre-ride. Ashok, your question regarding pre-ride, what was it? Or nutrition the day before, right?
Right. So every day before a ride, I try a different drink. I've never had the same drink twice.
Are we talking what kind of drinks are we
How do you
Everything from Pussy Jones to coconut water is my favorite.
coconut water?
Absolutely brilliant. It's got nutrition, it's got
So
Yeah.
coconut water, the electrolyte that it contains most of 85-90% is potassium.
Yeah, high potassium.
Has small amounts of magnesium and almost no sodium.
Right.
So that's one of the questions I want to address regarding hydration. A lot of us think that drinking coconut water is like this elixir, and it's going to avoid cramps, things like that. 80% of sweat is sodium, right? A very small amount of it is the calcium, magnesium, and potassium, right? So coconut water is great because you're taking in water, which is a large chunk of that is water in coconut water, and then you also got sugars in coconut water. So you got to remember not to drink too much coconut water because again the osmolarity topic that you mentioned earlier, and it's replacing just potassium, right? 80% of coconut water is potassium, but only 20% of what we sweat is, not 20%, less than 20, 5% is of what we sweat is potassium. So there's that angle. Yes, coconut water is good as a hydration. It gets water in your body. It's a natural hydrator because you've got potassium in it. So it facilitates the absorption of water into your system. But it does not satisfy the electrolyte requirements in the ratio that you're sweating.
It's not an ideal sports.
It's not an ideal sports drink, but it is great to hydrate. So that's good. You got a coconut water. So what are some of the other things? Just so we can like.
What about your Halli Ladoo?
Oh, Halli Ladoo. We talk about that later. So do you try drinking sports drinks the night before or anything like that? So you can adapt on that.
So starting with things like so one of the wonderful thing I'm talking about right now is whatever I make instead of putting sugar or whatever honey, it's date syrup. So date syrup is pretty good, but great amount of carbohydrates, complex, fantastic amount of protein, I'm not sure how much sugar there is. There must be a lot.
There is a lot of sugar.
Lot
I mean, dates, especially date syrup, is concentrated sugar. And the thing is, a lot of date syrup that we get, I think Lion makes a brand of date syrup, super high in sugar. So you got to be very, you got to look at those labels and you got to look at how your gut's responding to it. But yeah, it is a great source of I've stopped using date syrup, to be honest, because of the high sugar content. It does work.
Insulin spike.
Yeah, too much of an insulin spike, and I typically keep it to dates because dates I can count 4 dates, about 120 calories.
Also, dates have a little bit of fiber, so that does delay the absorption of the sugar. Whereas having the date syrup is like purified and it just goes straight into your bloodstream.
It goes straight to your bloodstream. There's not much breaking down that's involved there. That's interesting.
Probably the natural form of the sugar is better than the purified form because it has the fiber and everything that goes with it that delays the absorption.
Just to interfere, just look at your asterisk mark. They say like per serving. Although you see Coke is 500 ml, right? So it has like 10 grams, 15 grams of sugar for 100 ml. Asterisk.
Which Coke? Not the volume.
So it is 100, 500 as much as 700 grams.
Like, yeah, you pay like $700 for a word. Yeah, agave is great though.
This is another option.
Agave nectar? Yeah.
What about
GIS?
What I do is like, generally when I ride every day, it's around 1.5 hours. Instead of using water, I mix in a little bit of ORS for like very small amount.
Yeah. So ORS again,
I think I'm not sure about the concentration.
I mean, ORS, oral rehydration syrup. You see, there's a cool logo on the back. It was invented for dietitists to like diet. So yeah, you got to be careful about the concentration. And
What I do is like, I mix one packet in around 1 liter.
That's the recommended. That's the
And I
recommended.
take about 100 ml and mix it with 400 ml and I use it like very low concentration.
Yeah.
Because usually what happens is the water that you get has around.
But now that you have this data, you go back and see
Go
how
back
much
to
of
that.
sodium you have in your drink.
And also look at the group.
ORSL is mostly a potassium drink. Magnesium is only 5 grams, potassium is
That's sodium, that's not about
So the reason why ORS has a lot of potassium in it, because when diarrhea stew, you lose a lot of potassium.
Good amount of sugar also, 16 grams of sugar.
So yeah, you got to look at the sugar content, potassium content, and always remember that equation. Put in what you do. So yeah, with ORS, I was initially when I first came to India, 2012, ORS was my thing, and couldn't quite figure out why I was nailing, why my body wasn't feeling great. Switched to Gatorade, there's that sugar thing, and there's another extra sugar, I had to tweak it. Then I even tried my home mix of honey, lime, and salt. That never quite nailed it, I think, because I was putting way too much salt. I didn't know that. I didn't know that little fact that doctor told me to know. But ditched that pretty quickly. And then, finally landed on kind of salt tablets and, so yeah, that works for me right now.
Like a conventional electrolyte solution of like sugar, salt, water.
Yeah, so as long as you're getting that concentration right, as long as you're not putting too much sugar in that takes up your osmolarity, and as long as you're not putting a ton of salt in that's way that you think is probably not a lot, but it is quite a bit. So
Yeah, I think there's a specific formula from the World Health Organization that has like, I think it's just like a
Correct. You can make it at home.
That's ORS,
Yeah.
But again, ORS
Not ORS, just sugar, salt.
yeah.
Just sugar, salt, and water.
Fair enough. Yeah. So whatever.
But it's important to remember that you can go. You may not mess up your hydration and cramping too much by changing your glucose concentration. You may get like a bloated tummy, but you can really mess up your muscle situation and cramp situation by messing up your sodium big time. You do too much or too little, you can really mess up.
So there are a couple of questions. Any that come up right now?
Are we talking about lactic acid?
Sure. Let's talk about lactic acid. Yeah.
It's a controversial topic.
Yeah, it is a controversial topic. But
So lactic acid is produced, like I told you, through glycolysis. So in glycolysis, you have the fast and the slow glycolytic pathways. In the fast glycolytic pathway, it's producing energy much faster than the slow glycolytic pathway, and that leads to a byproduct called pyruvate. And pyruvate basically gets metabolized in 2 ways. One is through oxidation, and the other is without oxidation. So without oxygen. So when it gets metabolized without oxygen, then it produces lactic acid or lactate, and along with lactate it produces hydrogen ions. So there are enough studies now to show that lactic acid is not really the culprit at all. Lactic acid, in fact, provides more energy to the muscle. So you have this thing called the second wind phenomenon, right? So you see someone who's put in a hard effort and they're sort of walking and about to give up, and then suddenly they get another wind of energy and they go again. That's probably because of lactic acid. What's really the bigger culprit here is the hydrogen ions. So they lead to an acidic environment. So how it happened is people found lactate and they found this acidic environment, and they thought that the lactate or the lactic acid was responsible for that acidic environment, but actually it wasn't. It's the hydrogen ions which are responsible. So that's what probably leads to soreness and stuff like that. But what is your specific?
What is used to combat that? You're saying it's the hydrogen ion then.
Okay, so there are various ways the body does combat. So it has what is called the reducers. So glutathione is one of them. So if you have good glutathione stores, then it buffers off the hydrogen from your muscles. And it all comes from training, actually. So if you train your muscles, you train to do hard efforts or short anaerobic efforts, then your muscles also learn how to buffer away the hydrogen ions, so that it delays the onset of acidosis in your muscles.
It's like an HIT.
Yeah. So you basically train. I mean, it all depends. If you want to be a sprinter, then you train that particular part of your physiology, and your body learns to adapt around that. So that's one of the ways. So buffering is one of the ways that the body learns. There's no other way that you can delay. Yeah.
So and this goes to training a little bit, but just kind of bring it up. So lactate threshold. How many in here have heard that term? Lactate threshold. Yeah, probably. Okay, so lactate threshold is kind of where the rate of production of lactic acid in your body exceeds the rate at which lactic acid is being broken down, right? And maximum lactic steady state. So you can, at that lactic threshold, a trained athlete can stay about an hour at that level. If you're untrained, probably about 30 minutes at lactate threshold. That place where the amount that you're producing is more than the amount that your body is kind of breaking down and kind of feeding back into the system, right? So that's lactate threshold. One of the things you do in training to improve your hour-long efforts, like your 10K runs, and that trickles down to your 5K efforts, your marathon efforts, is to lift the level of your lactic threshold. That's the whole point of training. And how you lift up that lactic threshold goes very much into kind of the aspects of training. There are different ways to do it. You can train at that level, you can train under that level, or you can train above that level. So there are different ways to move that line, which is our fitness ceiling. For every one of us, there is a certain ceiling. And the way you lift it up is either doing sessions that are above that and pull up your fitness by doing VO2 workouts. And the other one is working under your lactic threshold and pushing up your fitness ceiling. So those are concepts in training that when I work with athletes, we figure out ways to how do we move that lactic threshold of yours up so that you can run faster at your lactic threshold, for example. So you can push up that fitness ceiling. And yeah, things like if you work above your lactic threshold in training, do VO2 max reps. So if you're a 10K runner doing 800 meter, 400 meter reps, right? That is a way of pulling up your fitness ceiling. And if you work above your lactic threshold, your fitness improves faster, but you can only do that for a short duration. You can maybe do above lactic threshold training for 2 to 3 weeks in a row before you start to your body starts to break down a little bit. And this goes back to training again. The beauty about pushing your fitness ceiling up by working under lactic threshold is you can keep doing it for a very long time. You can do it for 8 to 12, 16 weeks. And it's working slightly under your lactic threshold. So for example, if you're trying to work on your 10K time, you would do over distance over race distance runs, that's 75, 80%, 85% of your race pace, so that kind of pushes up. See, it takes longer. The body's response to that kind of training is longer, it takes longer, but you can do it for a very long time, So that goes into training a little bit, maybe a subject for another talk.
Naveen,
Yeah.
the level in which you were talking, you were referring to VO2.
Yeah.
Now, from what I understand, VO2 for cyclists can only be generated through a power meter. I mean, using a heart rate sensor, we cannot. So can we use the heart rate zones to understand our lactic thresholds?
Yeah. Let's talk about that afterwards, because it goes into that training. So there's a couple more things that I want to talk. So any more questions about nutrition, hydration from the audience?
Does milk have any role to play?
Milk, Doc. What's your take? So my take on milk is very similar to that with coconut water, right? It's great, and milk is awesome because you've got calcium, right? Huge source of calcium. Water is a huge chunk of milk. 80%, 85% of milk is water, and you got fats in there. I mean, so there's a lot of there's vitamins, there's minerals, there's fats, there's electrolytes. As a hydration, as a hydration solution, no. Milk in your cycling water bottles, or stopped by a cow inside for a reason. But I think it's great for rehydrating. I can't drink sports drinks all day, so I typically go to milk, and I typically do it before I go to bed. Like I do a 6-hour ride one day, go through 5,000 kilojoules, do about 4 Nandis, and I come back home and I'm 5 kgs lighter. That's because the reason I'm 5 kgs lighter is not because I burned through 5 kilos of fat. I wish. It's because I was not able to keep up with my hydration demands of that ride. And so for me, over the next 2 days, the process will be to kind of how do I bring my, and I don't chug 5 liters of water. I kind of come up to that level slowly. So I try to figure out all sorts of ways to squeeze in hydration into my day. Yeah, so milk is one of them. And how much milk can you drink? Quite a bit. Even body can take a lot of it.
Any kind of milk is
Absolutely fine. Absolutely fine.
I think milk is okay as a recovery drink.
It's great.
I prefer it as a recovery drink personally, and not otherwise.
Yeah, that's a personal preference. But milk is absolutely fine as a way to dehydrate. There's no concern about fats. I mean, a Snicker bar has 4 times the amount of fat than half a liter of milk. So, okay. So, a couple of things that I think would be interesting for everyone to hear about. So, causes of cramping. So, quick. How would be a fun way to do this? So,
somebody talk about the worst cramps you ever had.
Yeah, somebody. Okay. Anyone have a good cramping story that they have? Like an epic cramping story. Okay, cramp story.
So I cramped only once, and this was not because of hydration actually. So this was a race in Belgium, and it was like the toughest 40 minutes of my life. But I cramped. The reason I cramped was because my seat boards slipped and my seat moved forward. So during those 40 minutes, my upper body was like in a cramped position. That actually caused cramps.
Cool. That's very interesting that you brought that up because it segues really well into the point you try to make here. So why do we cramp? Everyone is cramped at some point during their training or their racing. Or is anyone cramped working in an office? Okay. So cramping, causes for cramping. Of course, I mean we're not world-renowned experts in this field, but have a little bit of experience. And I feel I've figured it out. No, but this is kind of accepted for the most part, by most of the scientific community as the causes of cramping. So cramping is basically where kind of muscle firing is hindered in some way, right? If you guys know how muscles work, if I were to take my quad off my thing, chop it in half, right? Muscle fibers kind of interlock like this. There's a mechanism happening here between active myosin fibers that kind of pull and relax to kind of lengthen and shorten the length of muscle fibers. So that's essentially what's happening. So what's happening and how does that work? The way that works is there are ion channels. So exchange of sodium, of electrolytes, of sodium and magnesium between these muscle fibers, these legs of the active myosin filaments is the mechanism of action that allows the muscle fibers to slide over each other, right? So there's electrolytes that are involved in calcium, magnesium, well not magnesium, calcium, sodium. Those are the ion pumps that kind of work over here. So the reason why cramping and electrolytes are typically used in the same line or same para is because of that fundamental to the operation, right? So what happens when you cramp is basically there's something that's being upset in the mechanism over here, right? That's either causing kind of muscles to kind of lock up or perhaps just spasm, uncontrollably. You probably had, legs cramped, yeah? Or you probably just had a lock up, right? So that's what's happening. And ions are fundamental to that story, right? And so one of the reasons why cramping happens is when you mess up your electrolyte balance in your body. Pretty obvious one, right? Another reason why it happens, and it's not it's not a prime reason. It's ultimately it is the ion kind of story that is leading to the cramping, but the story that Sarvesh mentioned, right? Cramping also happens when you exert a certain muscle to a point at which it has never been exerted in training, in previous training. So an example of Sarvesh is where his SIPO slipped, moved forward, right? And he was supposed to do the hardest 40 minutes of his life in an awkward position, right? So all of a sudden, he's gone from riding his bike at a certain seat height, certain reach, using his glutes, his hamstrings, his quads in a certain way. All of a sudden, he's been forced into this position where his body has been forced to use new muscles in a way they've never been trained before. So pushing muscles that haven't been trained beyond their work capacity, right, causes kind of this floodgate of kind of this ion mechanisms to just kind of give and cramping happens. So that's another reason. For example, whenever I race, I typically come into my season by building a good base, 16 weeks of just long rides, And the first race of the season is I always cramp. Because you never go as hard in that 10K of yours that you're gunning for in training. It's really hard. Very few of us have the talent, the mental ability to push us to train as hard as we do in racing. And which is why on race day, some of you might experience those cramps that you never had in training all of a sudden. It's because you've dug deep and you push harder than you have in training, right? So an interesting, a fun anecdote is at nationals, the national championships when I won in 2014. I trained like a madman to win, right? And with about 5K to go, I had done the best training I ever had. And with 5K to go, the cramps from hell came upon me. And I was just like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? 5K to go. I need to hold 45 kilometers an hour if I need to win this, because that's what I've been holding so far. And somehow I managed to push through it. But as soon as I stopped and got off my bike, my left leg usually just turned into an ironing board, right? And it's because that day, how much I wanted it was something that I try to visualize, you try to visualize it in training, and you try to visualize your opponent, you try to visualize stuff, but race day is something that's special, right? And interestingly enough, 2 months later, I won and that day I won by half a second, the second place. That's like the click of a Garmin button, and interestingly enough, there's a photo of me crossing the finish line with me using my Garmin before I crossed the line. That kind of the difference between gold and silver. Interestingly enough, 2 months later, so this is in December, interestingly enough, 2 months later, or a month and a half later in Kerala, hotter conditions, more humid, tougher course, I didn't cramp, right? Because I done this effort where I pushed myself to this limit. So, 2 reasons for cramping. One is kind of that messing up your electrolyte imbalance kind of just because you're messing up your hydration. Another reason, pushing your muscles to a level that hasn't been pushed before. So what can we do to remediate these 2 things? I've got a solution for you, not just giving you the cause, right? And this is something I've discovered kind of recently, and it works. One is, of course, nail your hydration, right? The other thing which I think that not enough articles have been written about, but if you guys are serious about your training and improving, even if you're a runner just tackling your PB in a 10K or a 5K, this is how you can avoid cramps. Build muscle strength outside of your sport. So strength training, because even if you do 15 body weight squats, 3 sets of it, the amount of especially for runners, the amount of strength you are building in your legs is more than you do in a run. Running does not build muscle, it doesn't build bulk, right? It doesn't strengthen. So adding a strength regime, if you're suffering with cramps a lot, one of the solutions is, of course, work on your hydration, but another is work on strength of the muscle group that is facing cramps. Okay, so if you're a hamstring cramper, work on your hamstring strength, right? So lift the ceiling of your muscle strength, so that in running you're not going to touch that ceiling. You know, the only way you can mess up is if you mess up your hydration, right? And that's something that has paid dividends for me. Okay, I've been cramped in like 6 months, you know, so that's a big. So that work on your strength, and of course nail your hydration. So that's kind of something we agreed on. And the other thing you mentioned is magnesium. So maybe you want to address that a little bit.
So there's not much written about it.
Right.
One of the ions believed to be important in muscle physiology is magnesium. So there are some people who tend to be, low on magnesium, and you can do a blood test and just figure out if your magnesium needs to be supplemented. That's all it is.
Yeah, and magnesium is supplemented how? Magnesium tablets,
magnesium sulfate tablets.
Yeah,
you can
Is that happening magnesium? I think
It says magnesium you need to take calcium, right?
Yeah, magnesium needs calcium for absorption. Right. So this has about 20 milligrams of magnesium per tablet.
It's not a lot. Yeah. Okay. So cause of cramping because coconut water we touched on, milk. Thanks for bringing it up, Ashok. Okay. So a cool thing, another tip to take home, and it's something that I do just as a habit now, is the question of how much to drink. It's a question you had, how much water, right? So this is kind of answers that. So weigh yourself before and after a ride. It's the most basic way to figure out your sweat rate. So I typically do this, especially after my hard days. When I have a 5-hour epic in the heat, I make a point to weigh myself so that I know when I come back, I'm not guessing how much water it is. So if you weigh yourself before a ride and after a ride, provided you didn't take a dump or anything like that, or and you're wearing the same things, the weight you have lost comes exclusively from water. It's not from fat that you burned or a little bit from carb glycogen stores, but how much do you store? 300-400 grams, right? So weigh yourself before and after, right? 99% of that is water weight. So if you see yourself in a deficit throughout the day, don't just down a bottle of water. Throughout the day, space it out so that by about bedtime, your deficit has been erased. And if you've done an epic ride, it's hard to do that in a day, and don't attempt to do it in a day. Do it over 2 to 3 days. But if you've done a 3-hour ride and you see a weight difference, try to eliminate it by the end of the day. That's just going to make you feel, because dehydration also affects mental state and things like that. So you're going to be duller at work the next day, or school the next day, or study for your exam the next day. So weigh yourself. It's a great way to figure out whether you nail your hydration. And the last thing I'm going to touch, we're almost out of time, is stretching. Someone asked about stretching. I think the location is left. But not stretching and cramping. I think that was addressed in the point that I made about why do we cramp. So not stretching does not necessarily lead to cramping, but stretching is a good practice in general, and
improves recovery and reduces soreness.
And there's a bunch of stuff I wanted to talk about, but
reduces the risk of injuries.
Yep, absolutely. Stretching. So muscle health, and this is just a bonus. This is our talk on nutrition and hydration. That's a bonus. And this is more important, I think, for amateurs, for people who run once or twice or ride their bikes 2-3 times a week, than it is for people who kind of averagely train. It's more important for the people at the end of the spectrum, I think, who just do a workout and rush to work and things like that. It's this stuff that's over here, some of the recovery aids, okay? And it's something that I only started using. This stuff is something I started using only after I had my first serious injury about 4 months ago. It made such a difference in my life. I'm thinking about getting a tattoo that says physio saved my life. So this is basically compression socks. You can get them at any. The funny thing is compression socks are actually invented for for what do you call it, like geriatrics, older folks who have circulatory issues, right? But now it's taken grip in the world of athletes. And basically the idea is
it came mainly from triathlons first.
Mainly from triathlons, and it's moved over to cycling and things like that. Yeah. So compression socks are basically, they kind of you wear them over your calf, and they basically kind of facilitate recovery in the sense they improve blood flow to kind of the muscles that have been just kind of used in your workout, and they kind of help for that. There's also compression wear that you wear during exercise, and that's to so if you have a large chunk of muscle that's moving around, it's kind of inefficient. And so compression wear during exercise, one of the things is just to make you more efficient in the execution of whatever movement you're doing, whether it's running or cycling. But another is also to aid in blood flow from fast cold days or days where that makes sense. Another cool thing is these things. So these are called balls. So it's a rubber ball. This one is called rubs. You can even use a tennis ball. Okay, a tennis ball is great. But what do you do with this? So basically, this is used to release trigger points. So you don't really know. And I suggest everyone who runs, who trains 6 hours a week, I'd recommend they make friends with a physio, go to a physio at least once, and just learn a little bit more about your body, One of the things that I learned, I've been riding for 8 years, about 200,000 kilometers, and I only learned about 3 months back about trigger points and tight muscles and really what stretching means and really what recovery means. But the idea here is, when we exercise, muscles tear to a small extent, and those tears are repaired, right? As we get older, as we age above 25, the level to which the repair happens isn't that great, or the efficiency at which it happens isn't that great. And you tend to develop these knots in your muscles, areas where kind of, there isn't that smoothness of the muscles sliding over. And it's not just a theory, you actually feel it in certain muscles. You can feel these knots, right? And the idea of these balls, those are called trigger points, right? When you have trigger points on your body, areas of muscle knots, those are areas that, even though they seem like they're reinforced like concrete, they're actually areas of weakness. And you've heard the saying, a chain is as strong as its weakest link. When you have a muscle that is knotted, this is an area of weakness. So yes, you can get away with it, but eventually one day you'll be doing your 10K, and all of a sudden the weakest link gives way. That's what happened for me, and it was 6 months of hell. So now I've got into that mode of kind of prevention is better than cure, right? So this is basically a ball you just sit on, you kind of roll on it with your body weight, and this actually works, It's the same concept as a physio kind of kneading the knot with his elbow. It's incredibly painful. On the scale of if you're going to a good physio, unless you're experiencing pain on the scale of 8, he's doing it wrong, So this is a really string point. This is another thing. This I picked up from Decathlon. It's really awesome. It's about, I think it's like $200. Best $200 ever. Hurts like a bitch, but and it's the same concept. The way I use it is because I cannot inflict enough pain on myself this way. I just sit on it and kind of knead the knot away, and it is incredibly painful. But at the end, once I'm done ironing out that knot, it is amazing. So a knot typically takes a couple sessions to get out. If you go to a physio, it typically takes 1 or 2. I had one that took multiple sessions to kind of get out. And then you have this, one of my most favorite things in the world. It's a foam roller. So this is great. This is just in general great for recovery post any workout, whether it's a gym session, whether it's a run or a ride. And basically, you can roll it on any part of your body. IT band, and of course, it's put on the floor and you roll on it. IT band, quads, incredibly painful. You can do kind of inner quads, right? You can do glute, you can do all of that. You can do lower back. It's just good overall. I mean, these go for around, You can get the foam ones that are completely foam. Those are really soft and they tend to wear, but they're good for beginners because these are kind of a little bit more painful. But you can get them for $700, and then the good quality ones are about 3K. So that's, if you go for a good quality one, you can use it for 4 or 5 years. So amortize that, it's like 100 rupees, a month, it's pretty cheap. So those are some of the tools. The other thing is, is this, it's resistance band, right? And this is aimed at cyclists, okay? Now, and this is again one of those things I wanted everyone to leave with because it's something that's affected my riding in a massive way. It's made me more aware of things like this. So, as riders, we are everything on our bicycle is kind of optimized to kind of move in a straight line up and down. And it's our quads. We look, when we buy shoes, we adjust our cleats, we don't put our feet in a particular way so that it's pointing forward, we don't twist it, this, things like that. You look for hip knee, foot alignment, in cycling when we do bike fits. We look for the right width of saddle so that hip knee foot is aligned so that you're powering efficiently. What happens as a result of that is you put a lot of miles on the road and you develop awesome musculature to move your foot in this plane, right? So you're great and incredibly strong at moving in this plane as a cyclist. You have developed quads, developed hamstrings, developed calves, developed glute maximus. The one thing that doesn't get developed as a cyclist is a muscle called glute med. Okay, it's the glute medius muscle. Now, can everyone stand up? I want you to keep your hand on your butt. Okay, and I want you to move your leg in and out. Relax your butt and move it out. So don't clench your butt. Relax your butt and move your leg out. Just kind of your toe out. You feel a muscle that kicks up? That's your glute med. All right, I'll fix it back now. Okay, so that's your glute med. It's the muscle that keeps your adducts. It lifts up your leg this way. A motion that we just don't do in cycling. Right? If I made you guys do this, you would feel your glute med activating. It's a muscle that comes from the top of your pelvis, attaches to the outside of your femur, and when it shortens, it lifts up your leg. Or when you pull your leg out, it fires. And cyclists do not use it. It is in slumber. Mountain bikers do. Now the thing is, when you ride a lot, you do a lot of brevets and things like that. A lot of long distance riding, a lot. So in my case, it was intensity that got me. One day, I was doing a 6-hour ride. I was in peak shape of my life, and this muscle just decided to say, "I'm done," and just spasmed. Okay, and a list of things happened. But the idea is, as a cyclist, you need to strengthen your glute med. So how do you do it? Simple. All you do is take a resistance band. Put it around your knees like that, right? And the simplest exercise is this. And you're pushing your knees outwards, and you will feel your glute med activate. So the simplest exercise is the clamshell. You just kind of lay down sideways. Yeah, lay down sideways and put your elastic band here and just do that. And that really targets your glute med. And it's like, if you're a cyclist, it's one of those things that will improve your riding. Because glute med is responsible for keeping your knee tracking the right way, And as you build, a lot of people complain about their knees hurting and things like that. They think, yes, saddle height does affect knee health, but glute med also has a lot to do with knee tracking. It seems disconnected. It's a muscle here, why is my knee hurting? But trust me, take my word on this, work your glute med and you're cycling with it. So, hashtag glute med, that's the hashtag for the night. Questions?
And asked about the VO2 max.
That's on a face-to-face basis.
Yeah. Somebody asked about stretching before a ride.
Yeah.
So that's been completely proven to be bad. No stretching before a ride. It impairs muscle performance. So if you want to screw up your ride, then should stretch.
So yeah, and to the runners in the room, stretching before a run is good. And
But I should qualify my statement by saying no static stretches, dynamic stretches are all right.
Exactly.
So you do dynamic stretches before a run is highly recommended. So you do your butt kicks and all that stuff.
Dynamic stretches, warm up, and then you can also do static stretching before the run. But yeah, you got to warm up before it, right?
Yeah. Did you say stretches are bad before a race?
Static stretching.
There are studies in muscle physiology which show that the muscle performance actually worsens after static stretching.
Static stretching, right?
So apart from hydrating and eating breakfast 3-4 hours before riding,
That's warm-up. And you know, if there's one more thing, if you do one more thing before your ride, group meal, hashtag group meal. And the simplest way to do it before a ride is, and that's a concept called muscle activation, right? There are a lot of deep muscles that don't wake up. It's your big movers that wake up when you just hop on the bike and start going, right? It's your deep muscles that kind of take a little bit of time to kind of wake up, right? So muscle activation is a concept where you kind of target those smaller muscles, the hip stabilizers of the spine. Mountain bikers, they do quite a bit of activation. Like all the pros, you see, when you hear these things and you go out and watch, if you follow bike racing, athletes and things like that, all of a sudden you start seeing these things. You're like, oh shit, these guys have been doing all this, I didn't even notice. So the other day I was watching this video of Oracle Greenwich backstage passes. Any cyclists in here, they probably watch. And these guys are doing glute med activation. I was like, geez, I see it now, and it's
so what's the exercise?
So they use an elastic band like this, just sit down and that's it. That's it.
Other important things I learned on day 5 of the Tour of Friendship. This is day 5, yeah. So you think, okay, it's a 100K ride. You don't need to warm up. Everybody's like standing the start line, chit chatting, cracking jokes, blah blah blah, drinking water because it's like seriously hot. And the moment my group started, the guy who was leading my age group is an ex-Luxembourg national champion. And he decided that today he's not going to let anyone break away. So he just took off. The moment we left from the hotel, he just took off. And I was right at the back, and I got dropped in like 3 seconds. And no warm-up, right?
Yeah.
And suddenly I'm doing this massive effort to try and bridge the gap to catch up with the fellow dog. And luckily I had 4 or 5 other guys with me, and in about 4 or 5 kilometers we managed to bridge the gap. And the moment I bridged the gap, there's this guy called Alan, who's from Shanghai, who's riding this, no warm-up. He just like, no warm-up. He warmed up like, he's a US guy.
Okay.
He warmed up like 15 minutes before the ride, knowing that this is going to happen. That's really important to stay sharp. It doesn't mean that you're in a big race, 100K race, just warm up. You never know what's going to happen the moment the race starts. Yeah. Big lesson.
And in terms of warm-ups, if you are going to do the harder the effort, the longer the warm-up. So if you're doing a track session that involves 400 meters on maybe and then just walk for a minute. The warm-up for that would be a 25-minute jog. Whereas if you're doing 8K endurance session, I'm talking with respect to a 10K run coming up this weekend. If you're doing an 8K session, you don't need to do maybe just a 5-minute warm-up will do it, and then go up to 85% of your race pace.
What do you do when you warm up for a time trial?
So warm up for a time trial, I've got a fixed thing, and
I'd say it was like the
no matter what it is, I've got a fixed warm-up routine. It's taken me about 2 years to get to it. The truth of the warm-up is, it's not very complicated. And yes, there is some things that work for some things that work for some people and others in a different way, but they're all pretty much under a bell curve. And the concept of warming up is this: you are trying to activate the energy systems that are going to be used for your effort, right? So if I'm doing a PCH tracker that's going to take me 45 minutes, I know I'm going to operate close to my lactic threshold. So I have to get my body ready for the demands of that effort. I get ready, kind of used to it, the feeling in my mouth, my lungs have got to get used to the volume of air that's going to be coming in. but my capillaries got to get used to the fact that that much blood is going to be delivered. So my warm up for a 40-minute time trial is this. I spin for about 6 to 7 minutes, and this is a warm up. The survey is probably like, dude, this is my warm up because it works. I spin easy for 6 minutes, and the idea here is taking my resting heart rate when I wake up in the morning probably 35, 37. I'm training heavy. And when I stand up, it's about 55, 60. And so I get out of the bike and I'm taking it from 60 to about 120. And heart rate's been nothing. I don't know why I'm saying numbers. I get it from zone 1 to around zone 2, an endurance level, and I do that in about 6 minutes. So that's just waking up the body in general, waking up the big muscles, waking up my heart and lungs, to increasing the volume at which my lungs are inflating, increasing blood flow. Then I go into a 6-minute build. Okay, so my 6-minute build involves starting at a high zone 2, taking the first 4 minutes to kind of build from zone 2 to zone 3 to zone 3.5 to right under zone 4. I take 4 minutes to do that. That's activating kind of the aerobic systems and kind of working right under lactate threshold. The onset of blood lactate accumulation is just not even beginning. I don't want that to happen, right? And then I sit for about 2 minutes if I'm unfit. So for BPCH race, I'll do about 2 minutes. For national championships, I'll spend about 4 to 5 minutes at my lactate threshold, which is, and I'm right under it. So it's right under my race effort, about 95% of what I'm going to be doing in my race. And I'll hold that for 2 to 5 minutes. If I'm fit, I'll do it for 5 minutes. If I'm not fit, I'll do it for 2 minutes because I don't blow out my bullets in my warm-up. And then I will bring my heart rate back down. Okay, I'll bring it back down to kind of my zone 1. Now all my big muscles have been activated. Blood flow is good to the level at which my engine check is done. I know how shitty I'm going to feel during the effort, and how it's going to hurt. What hasn't been opened up is my small, deep muscles, right? The ones that I talked about, root knee, gracilis, stabilizers, deep stabilizers in my head, transverse abdominis, muscles that stabilize the spine. Small muscles, that don't really come into play unless you really are going like really freaking hard, like the end of your effort. So what I do for that is a thing called potentiation, right? And this is basically moving my legs and my body at a level where conscious thought is not activating muscle activation, right? It's just subconsciously muscles are firing. So what I do for that is during the course of 6 minutes, I do spin-ups. Spin-ups are when you spin your legs on the bike really quick. So quick that you're not thinking how fast am I legs moving to the level at which, and this is done without much resistance. So I go to a really easy gear and spin off really quick, and this wakes up. It's a subconscious thing, and it inevitably wakes up the small muscles. And I do it holding my core relaxed, my upper body relaxed. Just like because that's the stuff that wakes up your deep muscles. It's called potentiation, right? And in running, you will do a little bit of leg drills. You do a couple of drills like quick kicks and things like that really wake up a lot of those small stabilizers that will come into your run. So running also, the concepts are same. You gotta wake up your energy systems, the energy systems that you're going to be using during your effort. You gotta wake up the small muscles. In running, you gotta stretch. You gotta make sure, because running is an exercise that involves a lot of not just goes into a little bit of muscle terminology, concentric contraction. Cycling is all about muscles working under concentric contraction. In running, you also have eccentric contraction. When your leg is extended, right, and you hit the ground, this is an eccentric contraction, and it's a different kind of forces that are involved, and which is why you need to do stretching, because it improves the elasticity of your muscles. And in running, that's important, right? So you do a little bit of stretching in running, but not in cycling. And that's it. That's my warm-up. I do a little bit of potentiation and a bit of cooling down to swing the heart rate back down. And boom, I explode all the No, only 6 plus 6 plus 6 plus 6 is about 24 minutes, 24 to 30 minutes is my warm-up. And it's the same, exactly the same for the past 4 to 5 minutes. Yeah. So if you find a warm-up routine that works for you and stick to it. There's nothing that changes that you need to change it. It's the same with nutrition and hydration. For the most part, our bodies don't change over time at that fundamental level. So
a lot of trial and error and experimentation that you do.
Yeah.
Figure out your hydration and nutrition.
Yeah.
Not a one size fits all.
yeah. So any other questions?
I have a question.
Shoot.
It's about hydration.
Okay.
Like generally when we are cycling, we are supposed to take electrolytes post-workout. Should we continue taking electrolytes or we should just take with water?
Yeah. So that depends on, so one of the checks you would do for that is the weigh yourself. So if you weigh yourself and you see a deficit of 2 to 3, I would say in excess of 2 kilos is where you have to be concerned about hydration. Kilo and a half, 2 kilos, even 2 kilos really low. 3 kilos is where you start to kind of think seriously. I need to hydrate. And yes, the answer is if you're 3 kilos off. Remember how we hypothesized that why is electrolytes lost in sweat? It's because that's how it has to work if we have to get rid of water. So if you've lost water, it's pretty safe to assume that you've lost electrolytes. And so the answer to the question is yes, you would replenish. But the nice thing about once you're home is you don't necessarily need to do it with a supplement. You can do it through diet. So for me, I typically, if I'm a really crazy, epic kind of nutty day, I'll do a chicken soup with a little extra salt, the hot soup after a hot day. Terrible, but yeah. And a more realistic scenario, what if, so the other day I go and I do my session, then I go and do an event, right? I was there for like 6-7 hours, and I couldn't eat chicken soup that day. So on that day, I had a bottle, and I dropped in a hydration tab. That's the thing about supplements. It's like, it's not like this magic bullet, but in our busy lives, it makes things convenient and makes things possible, And yeah, so if you had to rush to work and there's no time to make supplement in your diet, FastandUp is great because you can just have a glass of water and pop in a reload. And yeah, that'd be a great way to hydrate, and especially if you have a session tomorrow. If you want to get a nice workout in the morning, you don't want to feel like that, So yeah, answer to that is yes. If you lost it, put it back. Yeah. Yeah.
You see a lot of pro riders after a particular stage gets over, they get back on the home trainer.
Yeah.
And like after a particular brevet,
Yeah.
the house is closer by the cycle.
Yeah.
So is it similar or it's something different?
Yeah. So it's similar.
And also how does that help
Yeah.
for them?
So shutting down your body after a hard effort becomes immediately is not a good thing. So when you are working out hard, your body is pretty much in a state where things are being broken down. Arms are being broken down, muscle is being broken down. It's like a war zone in your body. It's like dead bodies everywhere. There's like little bits of muscle fiber, little bits of glucose bits. It's a war zone, right? So if you stop all of a sudden, it's like leaving Bosnia the way it is, right? You've got to do a little bit of kind of rebuilding, right? And so cooling down is that. It's kind of taking it from that high level, kind of slowly bringing it back down. It's basically your body is far from homeostasis when you are working out. And the idea of cooling down is bringing it closer to that level, bringing heart rate down, kind of not just shutting off blood supply to your muscles and capillaries, but kind of allowing the waste metabolites to kind of move back out and to go into the kidneys and livers to get disposed of and things like that. So that's the idea of cooling down. It's more important after a very hard effort. So after a time trial effort or 1 hour effort, more important than after a brevet effort. After a brevet effort, unless you are riding really hard in the last half an hour, you are pushing to make the time limit and you just really went deep, then 15 minutes to cool down is definitely a great idea. And the pros do it because they've got another massive session the next day. So it becomes all the more important for them.
Yeah, recovery has to start the moment you get off the bike. Immediately. You cannot wait.
Yeah. And another cool thing that actually we had FastandUp dinner about a month ago, and really cool idea. So recovery starts as soon as you are done with your workout. So The recovery is something that I find cool because sometimes I gotta run out and do something, right after my workout. Right? I mean, I can eat a couple eggs and things like that. But the nice thing about that is you pop into a glass of water and your recovery is happening, right? The other thing is you can also pop a bottle. This is the idea we talk about at dinner. Popping a tab of recovery in with the reload in your last bottle. So the recovery is happening while you're doing that 15-minute cool down. You start your recovery as soon as you're done with the hard part of the ride. So yeah. Okay. Cool. I think one more question and then we're out.
Can you tell me a little bit about stretching after the ride?
Stretching after the ride. Okay. Important. I would say very important. Something that I do. Now here's the thing with stretching after a ride, and it's a great test of whether you hydrated enough. So I don't know how many of you have tried stretching after like a really hard ride and you find yourself cramping maybe. So that's a pretty good indication that you haven't hydrated enough. You are asking about indications of hydration, if you're nailing your hydration. One is it's cramping. So if you try to do a stretch and you cramp kind of in your core, that's a big indication that you probably didn't hydrate enough. If you just finish your ride, don't put yourself in a situation where doing a stretch leads to cramping, because cramping is actually kind of damaging muscle at that point. In a cramp state, if you try to stretch, it's not helping you. So if you know that you try to go for a stretch and you feel a cramp coming on, don't push past it, let it go, work on your recovery a little bit, get a little bit of, if you're in that state, definitely 500 ml of water and reload, or in your meal, get your sodium, replaced. Then after about 2.5, 3 hours, yes, you're going to be cold, but do a little bit of muscle activation and then stretch, or do some dynamic stretching. Do a little bit of a jog in place or whatever. A nice thing is like jumping jacks or burpees or mountain climbers. That's like a problem. If you do mountain climbers for about 30 seconds at a high intensity, that's enough of a warm up. Anyone could be warmed up after that. And then you can go into a stretch. And yeah, but don't stretch if it's leading to a cramp, because a cramp is sending you in the wrong direction. It's sending you not up the slope, it's sending you back down. Take the slope is recovery, yeah.
And how much stretching is necessary?
How much stretching is necessary? So, so static stretching, typically the agreed on convention amongst physios and most people will tell you, hold your stretches for 15 to 20 seconds. 2 to 3 times 15 to 20 seconds is as much as you need to do unless you're really, really tight. If you're really, really tight, split up your stretching throughout the course of the day. Don't do a massive session of stretching where you do like 1 minute holds on your quads or like 10 by 20s on your quads. Don't do that. Split your stretching, maybe 6 hours apart, and of course do a small warm for each of them. But static stretching is typically that 15 to 20 seconds, 2 to 3. That's it. With cyclists and with a lot of us in our sit-down working culture, and in our stop culture, one of the muscles that needs a lot of stretching are our hip flexors, right? The hip flexors are the muscles that kind of do this. In cycling, it's the part that kind of lifts our leg up. Muscle that connects kind of our pelvis to the quad. And when we sit down, this muscle is just kind of cramped, right? Ends up really tight, right? And that's a muscle that needs stretching. So you basically kind of do that, right? And that stretches the hip flexor. So that's a muscle that cyclists really need to work on. In terms of, if there's one muscle you need to strengthen, glute med. If there's one muscle you stretch, hip flexor. Yeah. Right. And with that, our session is over. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Doc and Naveen. We have something to show you today, and we've got one last thing to mention as well. Please. So we thought this would be a good gesture for Doc and Naveen, and this is our latest Bounce on the Saddle t-shirts as well. So I've chosen the t-shirts based on contrast. That is, Naveen gets delighted. Doc
gets a duck and he gets
Guys can exchange.
I'm not putting it under my water filter.
So yours is small and Naveens is a medium. With this.
Alright, we will solve that out later.
They're brand new ones, by the way. They're brand new clothes.
I like it.
So you're one of the best people to have them.
It looks like a Fast and the Furious.
So that one last thing I wanted to mention is, so we spoke so much about physios and unit talk physios and consult them, deal them and all that, right? So we have Dr. Sitaraman over here today. Dr. Sitaraman, please. So he's from Physio BFit, and I'm not able to, sorry, I'm not able to include that game that we thought we'll have, which is the planking competition. Which has been a ritual since the last expert series. So what we were thinking of is we'll have a session of planks, and then the winner gets gait analysis and a spine analysis. But are you guys game for a planking session?
No, yeah, I'm too tired. Let's do another contest.
Sure. What do you suggest?
And this will be answered by a raise of the hand. Don't shout out the answer.
So while they're talking, I have one more contest, which is FAST&UP, which is they're also giving away a gift hamper. So Nagaraj will be responsible for that. Yeah. So I think I'm going to include all of this in the same contest. I'm not going to have any different contests. So let's see what these guys come up with.
Shall I ask the question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, what is the next question? Whoever raises their hand first gets an attempt.
Okay, just to give quick overview, there's 3 gate analysis, each will cost about 2,500 rupees. It's a static and dynamic gate analysis.
Okay.
So he'll tell you about it.
Okay.
And also spine analysis. He'll tell you.
Okay.
So 6 questions for you. So you need to give 6 people opportunity.
So the spine analysis the gait analysis makes sense to runners, right?
Yeah.
And does it make sense for day-to-day kind of? Yes. Okay, because predominantly, so this is the first of the kind CAD/CAM machine that we've gotten from Spain. This is the first in the country, and this kind of helps you analyze your knee problems because of your feet. See, running as such is a natural phenomenon, unlike cycling. Cycling is not. But since we all walk with our feet across, so just by having a wrong foot matching a wrong shoe, you can mess up, injuring up the knee, which may, as a cyclist, will affect you on the long run as you are into the sport. Right. So your feet form a very, very important part because there's something called as the ground reaction force, which comes in from the thing as per the Newton's law of pressures. So yes, the knees do get affected because of your feet. So that's where gait analysis, that's why as Nagaraj mentioned, we don't just do a static analysis, we also do a static and a dynamic analysis and a postural analysis. Okay.
That determines predominantly when I'm standing, what's the kind of pressure that I'm putting on my knees.
Alright, so it's like a
And you mentioned about the glute meats, quite similar to the glute meats, you have another muscle which is extremely important by mark of Bhateja, which is your vastus medialis obliquus, which is your quads oblique, which is extremely important as a cyclist for you to strengthen up. That worsens up with a wrong foot.
Absolutely cool. So the gait analysis makes sense for cyclists too. So what does a gait analysis involve? I mean, just give us a basic kind of.
So it's a CAD/CAM machine where it does all your pressure point testings and mappings.
Okay, so you have
Yes, it's predominantly a pressure point testing analysis which is already available. The video is available on YouTube as well as on our Facebook page.
Okay, cool. What about the spine analysis?
Okay, so spine analysis, unlike what I'm not too sure whether Dr. Arvind as a neurosurgeon would go with it. Yes, but we've had neurosurgeons who have backed up with us doing spine surgeries and other things. So this is a German machine which is a low frequency current which kind of is the non-surgical approach for any form of slip discs, scoliosis, Post because we all in majority of the people in Bangalore are in their jobs. So there are a lot of muscle fatigues that happen onto your paraspinal muscles and your deep seated multifidus. The low frequency current actually penetrates deep into your spine, almost close to the bone, and releases up all your muscle tissue to relax. So as you mentioned, knots that happen across with foam rollers. So the spine mat actually does all your release across everything from the spine.
Sorry, but more clarity thing versus an analysis.
So it also does a muscle analysis to check which part of your muscle is more pronounced to fatigue in the long run. So if you bend and you sit there, so the muscle involvement there is very, very high. So it checks your muscle sensitivity levels to help you stretch and work out on your deep seat spine muscles.
So kind of identifies areas that you need to work on. Okay, cool. So 6 questions. All right. So question number 1 is this. Then I'll pick up the other 5. Okay, actually I got it. Yeah. Okay, cool.
So what's the
raise of hand? Don't
what's
shout
the
out.
magic ingredient that helps muscle recovery and also has other very important functions that I spoke about?
Yes.
And you should watch out for who raises hands. She raised her hand first. You should definitely raise it. But next time, let's raise the hands without mentioning the answer in case. So, but you are first, so all good. So you get to choose because you're the first one. Analysis of spine. Is it called analysis?
Yeah, it's called spine analysis as well as it's called the muscle relaxation technique, which lasts in for about 60 minutes.
That thing.
There you go.
Yeah, you can step up that. You just up across. Yeah, no worries.
Thank you.
That's your spine analysis.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we have 3 more of the foot analysis and 3 more of the analysis. So wait, it happened already?
Yeah.
Oh, no. All right, question number 2. Everyone ready? Anyone need to stretch before this one? Okay. What is the active? Name one of the active ingredients in FastandUp Activate. Okay, but you're the only one who raised your hand. Okay, 1 here. You just qualified yourself. There are 4 more chances though. Alright. Doesn't it magnesium? No. No. No magnesium.
Yeah,
You are disqualified from this round. Don't worry. Which who raised hand first? Okay, you did. Go ahead. Arginine. That's right. L-arginine. Second promoter. Blood What are your? You get to pick. Huh? No. You get to pick for the gate analysis or the as your coach, I pronounce. Come on.
And before the third question, how expensive is spine analysis?
So the spine analysis and the gait analysis both are about 2,500, but what we are giving here is free.
Okay. Thank you. Awesome. Now, alright, so we have 2 gait analysis left and 2 spine analysis left. Alright, for the next question we've got dog. And again,
Okay, so how many calories per minute does the fast ATP phosphocreatine system give you?
You already have 2 hands.
Yeah,
36. You know, I missed the question. You get the unofficial crown of nerd. Good job, guys. Right? Which one do you want? Spinal? Let's put it this way. So you pick. Alright. So we have David Pilgood.
Take that up, yes. So whatever you
Not putting it back. Okay. Alright. Question number 4. Okay. How many calories are in a gram of fat? This one only the really rare one. You went first. Okay, you went 9. All right. You don't win. You raised your hand first?
I said 9.
You said 9?
So,
Okay, you know what? We got 2 winners. This get done faster. You pick one?
anyways, we have to watch who raises hand first.
Yeah, I know. Your answers. Okay. Alright, we got one more, and Doc, this is you. Please raise your hand, and we will ask.
I'm waiting.
And then you answer. Alright.
I don't know the answer.
Just ask one question. Ask something about you, spine surgery.
I'll answer.
I had how many questions?
One left. One left.
Easy one. Last chance.
What element is contained in FastandUp Activate? What element?
Element.
Yeah. Not arginine, not carnitine, nothing.
Right. Element. Oh, so single molecule.
Element.
Single atom.
Yeah, single hydrogen type of thing, but it's a salt.
Salt. Okay.
But it's
Which salt?
element? No.
So somebody said clearly that is one there.
Before you answer.
Yeah.
How do you know this, man? No. Alright. Last question. We disqualify the question. You have to give back your prize. If you think of one before I do, go ahead. Okay, yeah, why not make it a fast enough thing? Nobody has any faster in their pocket, right? Recover? Okay. Name. What is the sweetener used in FastandUp Recover? Wrong. And raise up your hand and answer. So we got 2 hands. Yours went up first. Go ahead. Wrong.
No.
It's a natural sweetener. Go ahead. Wrong. Go ahead. Boom. Sucrose.
And what makes it sweet is maltodextrin. So, and sucrose is very, very small portion. So because maltodextrin is quickly absorbed by the body, it doesn't stay as additional calories.
And you guys have to hear my tune. That is sweet. Alright. So, as one last gift hamper, FastandUp is going to give you guys the hamper. Do you guys have a bandwidth for any more questions, or are we?
Yeah. Anything other?
So this is the last question.
One lucky winner gets.
Oh yeah. Okay. This is my favorite part. And this, I guess, is just for the cyclists. I'm sorry. Okay. And this is by a raise of hands. Please don't shout it out. Name the rider who won the first stage of the Giro d'Italia, and what team does he ride for? Rajni. One more question. Please raise your hands, guys. Come on, civil. Come on. Yeah.
What to the fans?
I'll ask the question, yes.
Go ahead. Ashok, ask the question.
So I'll ask the question. If he answers it, you get something.
Okay.
So if he gives the set down in the Tour of Friendship, somebody crashed in front of him, and he fell in front and lost a bit of skin. It's called foreskin. If he fell at the back, what would he lose? Thanks. The question can't be this one.
I have no idea. I don't think I want to hear the answer. Alright, so how are we going to pick a winner for this one?
Ask another question.
Okay, I'll ask one more question.
Ask a nutrition related one.
Okay, nutrition related.
Okay, I have a question.
Okay,
for the cyclists.
Hand raised, please.
What bike was Tom Dumoulin riding to win the first stage of
that was Puma.
Jan.
No, which one?
That's the brand. What was the bike? What is the model? Go ahead, Superman.
Trinity Advanced.
Boom! Winner! You can pass your phone number, address,
Anything at the start.
everything. Sweet. All right. So, okay.
And whatever, sorry, lastly, whatever voucher you got, do not waste because it's expensive one. It's transferable.
Oh, that's good. All right.
So do not waste it. It's expensive.
Yeah, I think valid for 1 month.
Alright, okay. So I'm going to repeat this. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to close this by saying, going forward, we spoke so much about FastandUp and it's going to be available at our store as well, so you can drop in and pick it up. Have a good night and see you all next time.
Group